When did a nosy parent regret seeing what their teenager got up to? My son has a towel for a specific private purpose, and it needs to be washed. Ugh. My mum found my rear end plug tail on the bathroom counter. I'd washed it and forgotten it there. She was crying laughing as she just threw it at me. Well, at least you washed it. As a kid, it seemed like no matter where you hid stuff, your mother would find it. I had a nice stash of adult mags when I was a young teen and decided I would hide them in one of my guitar cases. Actually, behind the guitar. My mother would have had absolutely no reason whatsoever to open one of those. She still found them and acted like she wasn't looking for anything. I raised a daughter as a single father, and I am not a natural snoop. I try not to be too nosy. The worst part for me was having her around my mum. My mum is nosy. She's more nosy than any 5 people I've ever met. My mum was left alone in my house with just the dog when my daughter was 15. My daughter is now in her mid-20s, and I still haven't heard the last from my own mother about my daughter having 3 different vibrating toys and therefore being some kind of sick prevert. She hasn't lived at home since she left for college at 18, and I'm still hearing about it from my mum. My mum walking in on me doing a 2-handed lubricated pickle tickle. The headphones I had on were loud enough to block out the door opening sound, but not her scream. I should probably mention it was also her lubricant. I love that her reaction was to scream. Why wouldn't she just let out a sigh and close the door? That's what I'd do. When we moved house and all of the stuff was in the new place, one of the moving guys called me out to double-check the receipt, and when we were out of my mum's earshot and eyeline, he handed me the green herb pipe that had fallen out of the hidey hole in the back of my desk when they were moving it. What a bro. I found a doo-doo-covered, eggplant-shaped adult toy hidden in the now unused floor vent in the bathroom. I lived with my mum and 4 younger brothers. It doesn't matter whose it was, I'm still wishing I'd never seen that. I think I would prefer to believe that one of my brothers was gay or straight and liked butt stuff and was just also kind of a slob, than believe that my mum had really just given up on household hygiene to that level. No matter who it was, I'm unhappy for everyone with that decision though. The lack of hygiene, the lack of discretion, and the disrespect to the bathroom. Gross. I had a Dragon brand, eggplant-sized adult toy in a specially made container that looked like a pillow. My mum still found it. I'm a guy, she's Mormon. That was an intense conversation. I'm not a parent, but a snooping child. I found a box of my mum's toys and lubricant. In a different drawer, I found a photo of my dad undressed in the shower. My dad had died several years prior to my snooping discovery. The only time my mum ever searched my computer history was 10 minutes after I'd Googled what queefs were. I was playing a game of Scrabble with my mum and a friend, and one of us played that same word. We then got the pleasure of explaining what it was to my mum. She was so excited about the new word, she went to work that night and made sure everyone else knew it too. My dad once found a prawn-to-graphic image, as in a huge eggplant in a girl's butt, canine style, as my desktop wallpaper because I thought it would be better to crank it that way. Oh. My mum cleaned my room, totally not to snoop or anything, and found my toys when I was 18. Serves her right. The toys were really well hidden. She had to dig to find those things. I think what we can take away most is that there are no parents writing on their accounts here. It's just a bunch of teenagers caught whacking the mule in some way. This happened a couple of years ago when I still lived with my mum and stepdad. My stepsister used to live in my room, and it had been nearly a year since she moved out. I had a vibrating toy that my best friend had bought me as a joke, but not really a joke, for a birthday gift. I used it frequently and would hide it in the bottom of a drawer in my closet, hidden in a hat. And my mum decided to snoop and found it, but somehow thought it was my stepsister's and kept it. I asked her about it, and she was blown away by the fact that sometimes I liked to have fun with myself, but she was going to send the toy in the mail back to my sister without telling her. Now, that would have been a hilarious disaster. In short, my mum almost sent my toy to my sister in the mail. Oh, update. I texted her about it, and she had the typical response like, "Not my daughter." And yes, I did get it back, but I soon threw it out because the thought of my mum knowing that I used it was too much. I have a younger brother. I went to his room to search something up on the internet, and he had left his tabs open. Apparently he likes wincest, although I wouldn't say there was anything winning about that. My 12-year-old stepson's group chat on his iPhone, entitled Sarah Suck Big… well, you know where this is going. I was cleaning my 7-year-old's room because it was a frickin' mess and I was sick of it. I found a collection of apple cores, orange peels, and candy wrappers stashed under the bed. Some had been there for far too long. Back in high school, my friend Allie's house was right next to our campus. I wasn't allowed to go hang out after school, though. No boys were, unless her mother was home. Why? Because her mum had walked in on Allie going south of the border on a guy in the basement one day. The only reason I actually know this story is because one day I was there with parental supervision, and when Mum has to leave for errands, she said, "Well, I wish I could leave you guys here alone, but I guess Allie really blew that chance." I have never seen a teenager turn that red. I was a preteen at the time the internet was starting to get going. My parents saw my search history after I became confused how doing the deed worked in a gay relationship, and I Googled it. That led to some interesting questions. Not a parent, but when my brother was 7, he was complaining of my mum's PC running slowly. Out of curiosity, I checked history in case he downloaded any viruses. Minecraft adult films were multiple of the searches. Yeah, I wish I was kidding. So I have a bunch of weird sleep issues, and one of them is the ability to hold conversations with people while I'm in a deep sleep. I have no memory of the conversations. My mum found out about this when I was a teenager, and apparently she'd sneak into my room in the middle of the night, and Sleep Me would just dish out all the hot goss. Who was having a party, who I liked, which of my friends made bad life choices, everything. She'd never punish me for it, but would give me advice based on what Sleep Me confessed. It always confused me on how much she knew about my life. When I'm extra tired or stressed, this does come back, and apparently I've had hilarious conversations with my husband. I've just recently discovered that I've passed this trait down to my son. Part of me is tempted to get the scoop from my kid, but another part of me wants to respect his personal space. I'm a parent, so one weekend my wife and I are chilling out in bed watching whatever garbage on TV, when our youngest son, of 11, comes in and says his older brother, 13, is looking at prawn topography on his tablet. So we call for the eldest son. He denies and denies, of course, so we tell him to bring me his tablet. He hasn't learned the art of incognito browsing or clearing history completely. Going through his history, well, I'll be damned, he is looking at some wild prawns. Not just your regular crustaceans, though. There's some anime stuff, some real adult raunchy stuff, but the real kicker here was the Scooby-Doo shellfish. Fred railing Velma, Shaggy taking Daphne to town, Velma whipping out the old scissors with Daphne. So, Mum leaves the room to let Dad and his son talk about this. It starts with the usual, "Don't lie, you can't hide this stuff from me if I go through your browsing history. It's okay to tickle your pickle, in private of course, you're growing up, yada yada yada." And then I finish the conversation, give him his tablet back, but as he's walking out the door, I can't help but do my best Scooby-Doo impression. "But Raggy," followed by "Zoinks, Jinkies," and "Ruh-roh, found your prawns." His face got so red and I just lost it. I was in tears. Now, every so often, when he starts to cop an attitude with us, I just go "Zoinks" to him. Kicker of it all, the youngest son comes into the room later with, "I was only joking, I didn't really know he really was doing that." Classic younger brother behavior, to be honest. Oh my god, and you, Dad? "Ruh-roh, Raggy." Well, at least you managed to turn what would have been a traumatizing experience for both of you into one that was completely one-sided and only scarred your son for life. Well done, Dad. My son's Japanese tentacular spectacular cartoon whoopee collection. I need eye bleach. Not a parent, but a witness to their finding something they didn't want to see. I work IT. A guy had his adult daughter's computer that was having issues opening some photo application and needed it fixed. As we were going through and checking if it worked yet, I opened up the app and presented an image of his daughter undressed holding a big old marital aid. No words were exchanged. He closed the lid and left. I once found a sock that would not only stand on its own, but could be used to prop a window open. I would have sat the kid down for a conversation, but I don't have kids. I also have an uneven number of socks now. Ugh. My daughter's boyfriend left his contraceptive wrappers in her bathroom trash can, twice. It was a Magnum, both times. I'm very glad they're using double protection. She's also on birth control and they were both virgins. But gosh darn, I hate this. I was taking out her trash, dumping the small trash can into the large bag as one is wont to do in the house with 4 frickin' women. Well, at least he's got a Magnum dong. I was helping my recently turned teen cousin with a PC problem. I know his dad has some controls set, so I did a little snooping to see how effective they were. Apparently the kids discovered Futanari and the regular tentacly Asian stuff. He likes the classics. Black Bible was searched for a lot. I didn't tell his dad, but I did Purell the F out of my hands. Parents, why do you feel the need to go through your teen's stuff? My mum always went through my stuff. I never had anything to hide, but it always made me feel untrusted, and it made me feel the need to hide stuff from her in the first place. Even if it was something small like a date or a birthday card from a friend. Just let your teens have a safe place in their room where they can keep stuff that they feel is private. If you have any worries about substances or other things, be honest and open with them. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was 16, I had green herb duct taped to the ceiling of my blocked-off air vent in my room, inside a smell-proof case, and my mum still managed to find it. She searched the frickin' air vents. Protection wrapper in the downstairs trash, rolled up inside a potato chip bag. Found it. Lighter tucked underneath the seat in my car. Found it. Plastic bag full of empty beer cans that I hid at the bottom of our outdoor trash can. Found that. She loves me, but she was nosy as F and always on my case because she came from a very well-to-do family. Imagine how psyched she was when I came home on leave for the first time with a tattoo and a nicotine habit. Huh. My mum found a thing saying I was bi and confronted me while crying about it and begging me to tell her why I'd turned away from God. 6 years later and I'm still so far in the closet I may as well rule Narnia. Also, she found my Yowie stash when I was a frickin' weeb. Huh. On my 16th birthday, my girlfriend at the time was over and we were in my room watching a movie, just chillin'. I went downstairs at a point during the night to leave the girlfriend in the room to get a drink of water. Whilst down the stairs, my mum asks me if I had any laundry to be done. This wouldn't be strange for most 16-year-old guys, but I'd been doing my own laundry since I was 14 due to my parents regularly being away for days at a time for work. I was confused, but just replied, "No, I did some yesterday. I'm checking anyway." So she did. I got my glass of water, and one for the girlfriend, and started my path back to my room when 2 shrill screams came from that direction. I ran to the door, and my mother storms out, eyes on the ground, and grumbles, "I'm never going into your fricking room again." I enter the room, perplexed, only to find my girlfriend wrapped in a bedsheet on the bed, her clothes strewn on the ground. She had been sat on the edge of the bed with nothing on whatsoever when my mum walked in. The night was ruined, and my mother never entered my room again. I'm sure she regrets being such a nosy fool. You know the word flashlight? Well, replace the letter A in that word with an E in the next sentence. I found a small bag of green herb stuffed in the bottom of his flashlight. A friend of mine once set the homepage on his dad's work computer to a prawn site. You know, those viruses that automatically set themselves. His dad got greeted with a large woman enjoying a zucchini in a very unconventional way next time he opened his browser at work. He was not pleased, but the IT guy who had to take care of it must have had a good laugh. To clarify, my friend did it accidentally. He actually removed the Internet Explorer shortcut to try to hide it. Neither of my parents seem to be nosy, but I have had some interesting moments. Like at one point, my dad wanted me to look at something on the web and saw I had Medina Arabic on the bookmark tab, and naturally his first response was, "Are you trying to join the terror fighters?" I'm just really into languages, something that apparently my family finds really weird. My stepdad tracks not only my phone but also my bank account, so almost everything. He tried to track what I do on the computer, but I'm more tech-savvy than he is. I'm pretty sure my mum wasn't too happy finding my stash of diapers. She did know about it, but I still got looks after she clearly went through my room for who knows what reason. I wish I hadn't found my own teenage diary hidden in my teenage daughter's room. I'm always terrified that my parents will go through the various papers I have in my room and find the tests that I didn't do as well as they would have wanted me to do. Went to take a whiz in a stall at school, found a cell phone on the TP dispenser. It didn't have a lock screen. I thought I'd search in the contacts for someone the owner spoke to regularly, like mum or whoever, to send them a text, like "found your son's phone. It'll be with campus security." As soon as I swiped to unlock, it opened to a Google image search for Randy she-mails. I wiped the browser history, turned it into security, and went about my day like nothing had happened. It was at that moment that I realized how numb I was to odd stuff. I mean, I feel like you could have still sent a message saying it was with security, but then I guess you just wanted to eradicate any chance of ever having to run into anyone who had anything to do with the things you saw on that device. Oh well. I wish my mother hadn't found the letters, located in a hidden drawer from my first girlfriend. Getting home one day to find my mother standing there proclaiming my girlfriend to be an utter harlot was more insight into my life than I wanted her to have. In fairness to my mother, her judgment was spot on, but at the same time she had failed to realize that was why I liked her. Daughter had a phone issue. I looked at the search history on the browser and regretted everything. When I was in the 9th grade one Saturday morning, I'd gotten up at like 7:30 a.m. and went into the computer room and was no joke just watching porno. A black guy and a white girl, and my dad came in while I was just watching it. It was awful. Okay, but what about the reverse, because I found my mum's vibrating toy, bubbler, and stash of green herb that she apparently grew in our backyard. Look, I wasn't even being nosy, okay? Our family shares an Apple Cloud account, and when looking through apps that people had downloaded, I found one about different bedroom positions. My oldest kid at the time was around 12. Another reverse situation. I found an uncomfortably large, vibrating toy in my mum's room once when I was looking for candy, which she often hoarded. Oh, and it wasn't the cheap kind of toy either. They didn't spare any realism when they made that thing. Even worse, I thought it was a flashlight. You can imagine my surprise when the flashlight had veins, but of course, the most traumatizing part was when I pressed the button and instead of illuminating the drawer, it vibrated intensely. Took me half an hour to find out how to turn it off. My piece of crap brother-in-law would try to catch me doing stuff. My sister is much older than me, so I'd stay with them sometimes in the summer when I was a kid. He showed me his new computer and then said, "Don't give anyone my AOL password," and just left me alone for a day while I worked. I was 12 years old with free reign to the internet. He came home with a preverted grin on his fat face. "Did you know that I can see what websites you've been to today?" "Oh, I can." He sat down at his computer, fired up the history with a glint in his dead, piggy eyes, and, well, he saw 12 hours of me doing two things: reading about Animorphs and Star Trek, and chatting about Animorphs and Star Trek. I snooped on my kid's Reddit account. He has more karma than I do. Grr. I caught my 7-year-old watching adult flicks on his tablet. Electronics were taken, the birds and the bees talk was had. Not a parent, but my mum taught me how to wash my clothes at 6. She honestly hated doing the laundry that much. For my birthday once, I turned down her offer of $100 in exchange for doing my own laundry and told her to just instead keep doing mine, adding that it didn't appeal to me that much. She still wouldn't do it and left the Benjamin in my coat pocket. Being a late bloomer, I took home a girl to meet my parents and did the deed for the first time at 21 in their basement, as many young men do. Not wanting her to find the contraceptive in the garbage can, I emptied the rubber and pocketed it. I then changed clothes so I wouldn't smell like one does after a sweaty roll on the downstairs carpet, and, well, you guessed it, 90 minutes later I see my mum folding my clothes. I say, "You're doing my laundry," for the first time in 15 years. "And of course you checked the pockets, didn't you?" She folded quietly, looking down, and said, "Yes, Paul, I found the Johnny. 8 years ago, and that was, and likely always will be, the last time my mother did my laundry." Not me, but my family friend was looking through her daughter's phone without her permission. 2 minutes after I told her that she shouldn't do that, she found out her daughter had been on a lesbian chat site and burst into tears. Should have minded her own damn business. Parent here, it's not what I found, but what I didn't find. All of my son's friends are a couple of years older than him. A few years ago, every one of them got busted with pornography except mine. All the parents, myself included, joke that he's probably the one that introduced them to it. He's just better at hiding it. That, and I don't search his internet history. In high school, I bought a pipe for the smoking of ye old wacky tobacco. It went missing days afterwards, so naturally I was panicked. I searched the house top to bottom and asked my brother, who was 12, if he had it. His answer was no, and it sent me into a panicked loop of searching the house and re-asking my brother. I'd written it off until a month later when I heard a commotion from my brother's room. My father found the pipe and my brother claimed it was mine. My father stormed down the hall and woke me up with the "Is this your hash pipe?" spiel. I had to stifle a laugh, first time I'd even heard the word hash used as a substance name, and told him, "Nope, never seen that before." He went down the hall and proceeded to kick the crap out of my brother for smoking and lying. Still to this day, I have a smile on my face telling this story. Worst part is, I don't think he ever got to smoke anything out of that pipe, he just liked stealing things. I found a $100 bill in my daughter's jacket pocket. She was 3 at the time. I did find gay adult images in a rectory, that place where Catholic priests live. My Boy Scout troop was connected to my church, and our priest, who's a stand-up guy, asked us to clean out some of the spare bedrooms that weren't occupied anymore. This place was a frickin' mansion, so they needed all the free labor they could get with cleaning. Digging through one of the closets there, I happened upon a metric crap ton of gay prawns. They weren't magazines though, they were slides, like old-school slides for a Kodak carousel projector. Me, being a naive but not ignorant of how messed up the church is, 12-year-old at the time, I thought that there could be potentially some less than legal crustaceans in the mix. So I stupidly took it upon myself to look at every single slide to make sure I didn't have to go to the police. I tossed that crap in a dumpster and never mentioned it again. Waitstaff, what's the most convoluted order you've ever taken? I always feel bad for the waitress when out to dinner with my mother-in-law. I swear just ordering a glass of water with ice ends up being difficult. Oh, your omelets have 3 eggs? Can you make mine with 1.5? No yolk, just replace the 1.5 yolks with some extra egg white. I swear to frickin' God, I had a woman ask for egg whites, then insist on getting a discount because she wasn't eating the whole egg. If anything, she should be charged extra for wasting egg parts. Not necessarily a convoluted order, but I think it still fits here. I work at a from-scratch Italian restaurant. Had a guy come in with his wife and sit at the bar on a busy Saturday night. He informed me he was following the TB12 diet from Tom Brady's new diet and exercise book, and had very strict dietary restrictions because of this. He sent me back and forth to the kitchen no less than 7 times to verify the chef that his dinner order would have no iodized salt, sugar, olive oil, gluten, peppers, or tomatoes. He ended up with a plain piece of fish and some vegetables. We were getting slammed, but I still tried to keep my patience and accommodate the guy the best I could, even though doing so was putting me in the weeds. After dinner, I asked if they'd like anything else, and don't you know, this guy orders himself a bread pudding, very much filled with forbidden gluten and sugar, and eats the whole thing. He just goes, "Well, I mean, you have to allow yourself a treat every now and again." I died a little more inside. Yeah, he was off that diet by the end of the week, guaranteed. Kinda sounds like he was never on it to begin with. Some confusion arose once because a customer wanted a plain cheeseburger. Brought a cheeseburger with no toppings or condiments. She was very upset. Turns out she wanted a hamburger. My husband has this problem a lot, but opposite. He asks for a plain cheeseburger and they always bring him a hamburger. We've started saying a plain cheeseburger with cheese. I previously worked at a wing shop. Guy calls and asks for 24 mild traditional wings. He then proceeds to ask for them to be fried twice. No big deal, that's pretty common. He also wants them covered in Mexican shredded cheese, put in the microwave for 30 seconds, drizzled with mayonnaise, and wants his side of fries placed on the wings rather than in a separate container, and demanded the wings be in a pool of mild sauce, which was just short of overflowing the container. Finally, he requested to have pickle juice squeezed lightly across the top of everything. Obviously, all the waiters, cooks, and waitresses thought this was disgusting, but we'd never smelled something so amazing come from the kitchen in our lives. Did not taste as pleasant as it smelled. So I regularly talk about the posts that make me gag, but to be honest, they're generally reserved for medical story compilations. Congratulations, random wings orderer, you made it to the list. Yeah, can I have a Reuben sandwich but with turkey instead of corned beef, no cheese, and no 1000 islands? Can you do mayo instead? Oh, and can I get that on sourdough? Oh, and add stone ground mustard too, please. Of course. Would you still like sauerkraut on your not a Reuben? Coffee frappuccino. Half and half instead of milk, coffee filled up to 2/5 of the cup before blending, light ice, 2 shots espresso, shake ingredients and then blend it 3 times. Use half the bottle of caramel drizzle on the sides of the cup before pouring the drink in. Extra whipped cream, and then add more caramel drizzle to the top. This woman came in every day, watched you make her drink, and would force you to remake it over and over until she was satisfied. She once returned the drink for not having enough caramel drizzle. As I was remaking it, the cap blew off the drizzle bottle, and nearly the entire contents oozed into the cup. It being a frappuccino happy hour, I said, "Screw it," and gave it to her like that. She said it was the best she's ever tasted. The entire store absolutely loathed frappuccinos. I'll just throw mine on yours since it's another Starbucks customer. venti, heavy whipping cream, 7 pumps of white mocha, 6 pumps caramel flavor, 5 shots, 4 Splenda, 3 sweet and low, extra caramel sauce drizzle, like a quarter of a bottle. She came in every single morning for this abomination, but she tipped really well, so hey, whatever. I serve food at a country club, so I deal entirely with people that have more wealth than I'll probably ever have. A lot of these people are really nice and are actually friendly. However, many are also very snobby, high maintenance, and just rude. One night I had a table. It was 2 couples on a double date, and both couples were less than friendly. One woman ordered a salmon. I can't remember the rest because this one woman was the bane of my existence. I serve them entrees and let them eat for a while before I do the typical, "How's everyone doing?" 9 times out of 10, everyone just says everything's fine and just want me to leave so they can eat. Not this lady. She calls me over and tells me she didn't think I gave her salmon. Looking at her plate, I can see the fish is pink and very clearly salmon. I've served the salmon hundreds of times. She insists I go to the kitchen and ask what fish it was. Of course it's salmon, which I return and tell her politely it's indeed salmon. She gets angry and tells me how it doesn't taste like any salmon she ever had and that she's had salmon many times and that what I served her wasn't salmon. After getting more and more angry about not having salmon, she looks me dead in the eyes and says, "This tastes like turtle." I honestly didn't know how to react, so I just asked if she was sure and she says, "Yes, I actually like it, but it isn't salmon." I'm still blown away by this woman. She got so angry with me about this mix-up. We don't serve turtle. I don't know anywhere that does, and she liked it? I don't understand these people's lives. I had someone order a side of jalapenos to be put on their burger. I bring them out, she looked at them and tells me they're green onions. They were just fresh jalapenos, and the only kind she had apparently ever seen were the pickled ones. I told her they were jalapenos, and she fought me tooth and nail over it. Made me get the manager and still didn't believe them. People amaze me. I'm no waiter, but I do work the food line at my restaurant. The weirdest thing I've seen was a lettuce-wrapped taco with only lettuce in it. A lettuce wrap is a taco shell that's made of lettuce, by the way. I used to work at a burrito joint. Someone ordered a burrito with bean juice but no beans. This one guy ordered spaghetti and meatballs at a restaurant I was a cook for, except he wanted French fries instead of spaghetti noodles. I had a friend who would always order a glass of water with no ice, with some extra lemon slices. Then he'd start making free lemonade at the table. Sometimes there weren't sugar packets at the table already, and I'd die inside when he asked the waiter for sugar packets. By the time we got our food, his warm lemonade was ready, at which point he'd ask for a glass of ice. A half rack of ribs, no sauce, well done, microwaved after taking it off the grill for 5 minutes. 8 sides of Thousand Island dressing to dip it in, broccoli, no butter, triple steamed, a sweet potato with 4 sides of sour cream, a water with no ice, and then 2 cups of ice. Then 15 minutes later decided he wanted another half rack of ribs the same way. This was a year ago, but I will never forget because he snapped at me a ton of times while I was talking to other customers. Then he had the nerve to complain to my manager because his rolls came late, but they'd just been popped into the oven and were baking when he ordered them. Screw that guy. Why is this the second order that specifically requests the freshly cooked food be microwaved? That's a crime against the culinary personnel in my mind. So gross. I once had a woman order her eggs fried hard, scrambled hard. And when I asked her if she wanted her eggs fried or scrambled, as they're 2 completely different ways of making eggs, she had no idea what I was talking about and kept repeating, "Fried hard, scrambled hard." It took some pressing from both myself and her group to figure out what she wanted. I believe it was scrambled hard. She's kept saying that she's just always ordered fried hard, scrambled hard, and didn't understand our confusion. "I bought my own tea bag. Can I have some hot water, please?" 5 minutes later, "Can I have a lemon wedge, please?" 2 minutes later, "Can I have some honey?" I hated the ones that wanted to make their own lemonade to try and avoid having to pay for it. "We'll have water. Could you bring out a cup of sliced lemons and a bunch of Splenda as well?" Not necessarily convoluted, but worked in an Indian restaurant in the UK with a kitchen staff of all Indian people, and lots of people would come in and pretty much detail exactly how they wanted their curry cooked. Like, "This is not a jalfrezi," upon being presented with their dish and then explaining to the manager how it should be cooked. I feel like I should point out these were obviously non-Indian people. I had a guy order a chicken korma but make it spicy. After much discussion, the chef agreed to put some chili into it, knowing well that the dish would be weird. A Caesar salad with no croutons, no chicken, no dressing, no bacon, and no cheese. So it was just lettuce. What the frick? Seems like it would be easier at that point to say, "I'd just like a bowl of romaine lettuce with lemon squeezed over it." A guy in front of me in the line ordered iced coffee heated up in a microwave. The barista replies, "You mean hot coffee?" To which he replies, I don't know. When I'm home, I make my coffee the night before and put it in the fridge and then microwave it the next morning. That's almost endearing. I hope the barista said something like, "Well then, prepare to have your mind blown and your coffee experience taken to the next level," and then proceeded to pour him some fresh, hot coffee. Philly cheesesteak sandwich. No cheese, no peppers, no condiments, no bread, no side of fries. She wanted to pay $16 for shredded beef with onions. My daughter was just old enough to go through a buffet alone. She wanted a slice of roast beef and heard people ahead of her ask for medium. She thought, "I'm smaller than them, so I don't need a big piece." The guy slicing off portions asked her how she wanted her beef, so she said, "small." He just silently gave her a small piece of medium-done roast beef. Eating at an Indian restaurant, I overheard a woman ordering nearby who wanted a curry but steamed veggies, no oil and no salt. No rice, curry on the side. I have no idea what the kitchen actually made for her. I feel like she doesn't often go to restaurants. Not so much convoluted as stupid. Our wings were breaded and he didn't seem to read that part on the menu. He sent them back because of the extra carbs and ordered a hamburger, no bun, with a side of fries. I didn't really mind this order, but it was very odd and multiple managers came to ask me about it after I put it in and laughed when I showed them. I do all of the Grubhub orders at the restaurant and someone simply ordered 4 lemonades. That's it, for $2.50 each plus the delivery fee. And the go-to drinks aren't very big, and it's just run-of-the-mill lemonade. I really wish I got to deliver the drinks to the person to see what was up with that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A kid asked me for a cheeseburger, but cheese on only half the burger. So half hamburger, half cheeseburger. The parents were a little embarrassed and said I didn't have to humor him, but I liked the cut of his jib. This kid knew what he wanted. I walked the order back to the cook, explained the situation, and the whole kitchen got on board. I used to work at a Steak and Shake, and my favorite customer ever was the kid who ordered a Krabby Patty, and his parents who were silently pleading with me just to go with it. I did, and the kid lit up when he got his order, and it was adorable. When I was a kid, my mum would often do crazy things like go through the drive-thru at McDonald's and ask the people inside to open a can of tuna for her. She was on a weird self-imposed diet. Then when they opened the can of tuna, she would complain that they didn't drain the water correctly. I was just a kid, but would basically die from embarrassment in the back seat. I once had an old man send back a plate of hash browns twice because he wanted them burnt to a crisp, like completely blackened. "But of course, sir. Might I also suggest sir just lies on the ground so he can shovel the ashes directly from the fireplace into his gullet? Bon appetit." Not convoluted, but I once had a guy order a pizza with no crust. Okay, like crust cut off? No, like no bread at all. What? We ended up taking a takeout container, putting in sauce, cheese, and pepperoni, heating it up, and they ate it with a spoon. It still haunts me. People that go into length about how they can have absolutely no gluten, then moan and complain when there are no croutons on their salad. Worked in a restaurant that took the gluten allergy really seriously. Lady says she's allergic to gluten and even a crumb will give her issues. Okay, this is a pizza place. So they cleaned the entire area, made the pizza, and brought it out to her. She loves it. Good. Came back 5 minutes later and she's trying a slice of her husband's pizza, which was not gluten-free. I told her that what she's eating isn't gluten-free, out of caution, and she said, "Well, it's not really an allergy, I just don't want it in my food." Stupid, entitled, bint. I came into a shift where the previous server already had a full section. No problem, you just explain to the guest that you're taking over and to let you know if they need anything. Everything is great, I have one mum and daughter table. The previous server had already taken the order and put it in, so I was basically there to finish them up. Their meals are good and they're enjoying everything. Time to give her the check and she goes, "For future reference, if someone tells you they're low-carbing, you don't give them dates and craisins in their salad." What the frick? The menu is literally right there and it says the salad comes with those things. Granted, I didn't take the order and still apologized to her, but Christ, if you're following a diet, it's your responsibility to be mindful for what you put into your body. We called it the Corey Special because this guy would come in every week and get the exact same thing. Large yum bowl and greens, vegan sub avocado, add cabbage and carrots, half sauce sub nori, add tempeh, no chips, sub crispy noodles on a plate, half rice sub greens. He was a super nice guy though, so no one really minded that he had the order from hell. I used to work as a waiter over the summer. Second day on the job, a group of 20 arrived who had all pre-ordered their meals a month ago for the booking, and no one could remember what they ordered. By some kind of cosmic punishment, I was the only waiter they sent to the group. This happened to me one time also. I had a sheet of paper with people's names and what they ordered for each course, but nobody was wearing name tags and people were too busy talking to listen to their names being called. Luckily, this one lady in the group asks if she can help, so I give her the paper and she starts directing me where to go based on the plates I was holding. She said that she was a waitress before when she was in college and also saw how frustrating the situation was. I brought her a drink before she left. The order itself wasn't particularly difficult, but this lady wanted weak tea, like hot water that has a tea bag put in for a very short amount of time. Simple enough, we're on the same page, right? Problem was, she didn't want me to bring her the hot water and the tea bag, she wanted me to make it for her and to do so perfectly. It took like 6 or 7 tries before she was like, "Now that is some good weak tea." The guy she was eating with was covering his face in shame for being seen with this woman. I wanted to get as far away from her as possible. Since her drink order was so annoying, I was afraid of what her food order would be. Thankfully, she didn't ask for anything special in that department, but I was half expecting to have to heat her food to a very specific temperature or something along those lines. I had a woman once come up and scream at me in front of a full house because I recommended our club sandwich to her husband and he could not finish the sandwich. She stated that I emasculated him and that they'd been coming to our business for a long time and that she couldn't believe he was being treated that way. I know that she was trying to get me to comp the sandwich, but I refused and told her that's why we offered to box food up. They never came back. I rarely, if ever, have been rude to a customer, and deep down it bothered me that I was the reason they didn't come back, but at some point you have to take a stand from being taken advantage of. A man with a hangover swore blind that the best cure for said hangover was raw steak. So he ordered raw steak and I served him raw steak and then watched as he ate that raw steak like a famished velociraptor rex. Cook a large flank steak fried in salted butter. Eat that, put on a pair of wet socks, and go to sleep. I cannot for the life of me imagine why consuming raw beef would reduce the likelihood of throwing up. Quite the opposite, actually. But you do you, my self-poisoning boozy wastrel. Worked at a steakhouse very similar to Texas Roadhouse. I had someone order a salad without lettuce. They just wanted a plate with all the different toppings around the edges. Dressing, carrots, cheese, etc. Not as crazy as others, but it still blew my mind. One customer, 2 orders. The first would be paid by card, a cheese and ham toastie with a cup of tea. The ham had to be taken out of the toastie and put in a separate bag, and the toastie had to be cut into quarters and delivered to their table. We don't do that normally. The second part was paid by cash and was a tandoori chicken baguette, cut in half, delivered in 2 separate bags, and a long black with milk and water on the side. Again, we don't do that. Greg's is a tiresome job and customers like that only make it worse. I was a cook for years, but my favorite was this. A waitress ordered a burger and said the customer wanted it between rare and medium. So I said, so they want it medium rare? She went, no, they want it between rare and medium, which initiated a 2-minute discussion between her, another cook, and myself about the fact medium rare is between rare and medium. A medium rare steak with no blood was sent back twice before we gave him a well-done steak. He said it was the best steak he'd ever had in his life. He also didn't tip. I take orders from people who want seafood steamed at my store. I work the seafood counter at a grocery store. Weekends bring the drunks out. They always take about half an hour to figure out what they want and it always ends up being pricey. Last weekend, an intoxicated woman riding one of those scooters meant for the disabled took the cake. She had 2 toddler-sized kids in the scooter basket and a friend walked alongside her. She had me weigh out portions of almost everything in our case. She finally settled on U2 crab legs. She wanted them seasoned and steamed. She couldn't decide what seasoning, so she just told me to mix them all and throw it in there. We have Creole, Old Bay, lemon pepper, and slap your mama. Her ticket came to $99 as those giant crab legs are about $36 a pound. She waited around while I prepared her order. When it was done and packaged, she stood up from her scooter and wobbled toward me to take her package. She said, "Woo, they smell funky. I don't want it no more." and she rode off into the night, leaving behind the vapor of cheap whiskey. I worked at TGI Fridays and waited on some insane woman. She told me she wanted the Parmesan shrimp steak. This was a popular advertised item at Applebee's at the time. I told her that we don't have that, but if she really wants it, there's an Applebee's down the street. She asked if we had anything like that. I told her we have steak and we have grilled shrimp skewers. I told her we didn't have any type of cream sauce and the food wouldn't be exactly like Applebee's. She says fine and orders that. I think everything is fine until the food is brought to her, and I kid you not, her face goes white and she looks at me like I just murdered her firstborn. She starts yelling how it's not the Parmesan shrimp steak and that the shrimp were on the side of the plate and not on the steak included. She probably ended up getting the food comped or some crap, since that's how those corporate chain places operate. She ate the whole thing anyway. You could have walked to Applebee's from her table, so either she was insane or just wanted free food. I saw more people get crazy upset about their $10 plate of garbage chain food than you would ever imagine. In short, woman orders an Applebee's menu item at a TGI Fridays. When it wasn't exactly the same, she lost her damn mind. 12 German guys spread out between 3 tables. Perfectly pleasant, though language is a bit of a barrier. They all ordered gammon and chips, cod and chips, burger and chips, etc. A low-alcohol lager each. It was a roadside restaurant. So far, so good. Then for the next hour or so, they would call me over and order another lager there, another there, and a third for this chap. I think it had something like 0.4% alcohol, and they were trying to make up for it to the level of a normal pint. Then, having eaten their meals, they wanted the same again. Only this time, one guy wanted the cod and the other wanted the chips on a separate plate. Ditto the gammon, then desserts. About half of them had a second dessert. Then they wanted to pay separately, not split the bill 12 ways. They wanted to pay for exactly what each of them had. I left the manager with them at the till. Luckily, she spoke German. What's the worst way you've seen a person self-destruct in court? I took my ex to court because she had used my social security number to sign up for cable. I found out about it when she stopped paying for the service. She screwed herself over by just being herself. We showed up to court, I turned in the contract from the cable company, showing my social security number and her own name signed on the contract. She didn't even try to forge my signature. She signed her own name in and tried to deny that she had had any part in it. The judge tore her apart, and it was nice. Represented a guy that stole 3 trucks from his work. Only 2 were recovered before trial. He showed up to a motion hearing in the 3rd one. I'm doing landlord-tenant cases, and my client was facing eviction over non-payment, but the client was withholding rent payments because of habitability issues in the department. No heat, high lead levels, vermin. This is going to be an easy win for me. I told my client continually to make sure they don't spend the money. Keep it, but don't spend it. Because if you showed the judge you still have the money, it looks really good for you in terms of making the judge believe that you're withholding for good reasons. We get up in front of the judge, the landlord doesn't have an attorney, so I'm dancing inside. There's no way I can lose. I make my arguments and the landlord makes his. Judge asks my client if they still have the money. The client goes, "Nah, I blew that crap at the casino last week." My wife is the lawyer. When children reach the age of majority, if they don't continue studying and start working, it's not necessary to pay alimony. My wife's client found a new lover, which unleashed the wrath of the ex-wife, who started asking for more alimony for her children. Well, to win the case, it was necessary to prove that the children were working, but they could not get any proof of it. There was not much chance of winning, but they still went to court hoping that with the interrogations, they could find information that would put them in evidence. On the day of the trial, the children did not go, only the mother and her lawyer were present. The judge said, "Madam, tell me why your children couldn't come." The mum said, "They couldn't get permission from work." The judge and mother stared at each other for about a minute in awkward silence. Then the judge said, "Well, that was fast." I should note that the topic of this story grouping was what was the worst way you saw a person screw over someone else in court, but so far every single story I've read has been clients self-screwing. But don't be surprised if the original context rears its head at some point. I had a client who was trying to get away from a psycho ex and filed for a restraining order. He shows up to the final hearing and is making a big fuss about a truck they brought during their marriage. He said it was just his and she had no rights to it because their marriage was void. I asked him on cross-examination what he meant by that, and he said that he had already been married in another state when he married my client. He said that my client had no idea, but that it means that their marriage is invalid and the truck was all his. Not only is that legally inaccurate, the transcript of the hearing was promptly turned over to the police, who are actively investigating him for bigamy. Oh, and the judge gave my client the truck along with a 2-year no-contact order. A friend kept meticulous records of how much time his estranged wife spent with their daughter. He used pink highlighter for Mum and blue highlighter for himself. Mum sailed into arbitration demanding full custody and handsome child support and the house. Dad pulled out 3 years' worth of year-long calendars. Mum had spent less than a full month with the child in 3 years. I can tell you she wasn't happy with the outcome. This might be a dumb question, but how are the calendars verified to be true? You'd be surprised. Not divorce-related, but a previous co-worker, we're civil engineers, had a case where the only thing that made it not a he-said-she-said situation was that he kept a phone log with short summaries of what was decided. It was basically, he's got a log that he's willing to swear by was written the day of the call that says you approved this change. Do you have anything to the opposite? I'm a lawyer. I saw someone screw themselves. I work as a public servant in a criminal law judge's office, and since I have a law degree, I don't normally do administrative work, though I get to be with the judge in some of the hearings. Last month we had a huge substance trafficking case. I'm talking about 20 or more people involved, months of investigation, undercover agents, videos, audio, the whole ordeal. The hearing lasted 3 days. Anyway, when it was time for one of the defendants to be on the stand so the prosecutor could read the charges he was accusing him of, he was pleading not guilty, as he very loudly stated from the majority of the hearing up until my boss, the judge, told him to shut up or he would be admonished. To which he replied, "What are you going to do, arrest me?" Which, to be honest, was actually a bit funny. The prosecutor, as part of the facts of his case, told him that he was being accused of selling, trafficking, and carrying X amount of X substances, with the base of his operation being his house, where he lived with his partner. Mind you, said partner wasn't even in the hearing. She wasn't arrested or anything, as there was nothing tying her to the case. And the defendant said, "Wait up. I was the one selling the substances. She didn't do anything." His lawyer, a state-assigned public lawyer, facepalmed so hard it's actually recorded in the audio of the hearing. A witness for the plaintiff in a civil suit, who was a co-worker of the plaintiff, testified very strongly against the company and in favor of the plaintiff. I questioned her about bias towards the plaintiff, if they knew each other well and were friends, etc. She said no, just friendly co-workers, work friends at best. I pinned her to it. When I got a chance to cross-examine the plaintiff, she had no choice but to burn her witness's credibility, because not only were they very close friends, but they'd become sisters-in-law just a few years before. No, they didn't have the same last name or anything, but I'd done my homework. I still don't get why people want to fight small bias by destroying their credibility, but it happens more than you'd think. I'm being sparse on the details here due to confidentiality, but I had a client who was accused of very nasty offences at work. He had an alibi. He was at work where he was the boss. He had an employee who could absolutely vouch for his being there. I talked to the employee, and the employee confirmed this. It gets closer to the trial, around the time when I need to send an alibi notice, which is advance notice to the Crown so that they can investigate the alibi and determine whether or not it's true. But I'm being careful, so I call the employee up again. It turns out my client fired him in the interim, so the employee quite candidly tells me, the lawyer, "Oh yeah, he was definitely at work, but that's not what I'm going to say in court. Screw that guy, he's going down." I didn't call him as a witness or file the alibi notice. I still won the trial, but if I hadn't thought to call the guy or if he'd been less candid, my client would have been screwed really bad. He would have been on the offender registry, had jail time, the works. Completely innocent. Wait, he was the boss and stupid enough to fire his alibi witness before the trial? My God. From talking to the employee, I'm guessing he sorely deserved the firing. That said, people accused of crimes might not be the brightest, but even the smart ones often make some dumb mistakes. I mean, a lot of people with illegal content on their laptop get caught because they take their computer in to get fixed and don't think, hey, I'm handing off evidence of very serious crimes to a random stranger. The narrator is certain that due to both his inability to lie and tendency to immediately say the least appropriate thing in any given social context, he would end up in one of these stories if he ever did a serious crime, and then maybe someone will narrate my court case on this channel. Too many criminal client situations to count of them screwing themselves over. One of the very few family law cases I handled as a young attorney sticks out to me though. A young woman and a young man have a child. The young woman seeks divorce from young man because he enjoys the thug life. He had recently been arrested and charged for possession with intent to distribute crystal, a felony, and in possession of a firearm, unlawful carry. The young man doesn't like her leaving him. He hires a local big-name top divorce attorney, granted, very rural area, gets a temporary divorce order entered saying she can't have overnight male guests. This is actually more common than you would think in conservative areas. I think it's mostly a thing of the past in more urban places. The young woman starts seeing someone new. The young man is very upset about this. He has his fancy lawyer ask for a hearing, accusing her of violating court order and seeking full custody on top of attorney fees. The young woman, on advice from a mutual friend, hires me for this hearing. I sit down with the opposing counsel, and she's basically trying to strong-arm me with her experience and lays out egregious terms. The mother must not only give up her primary custody, but must have visitation with a supervisor and pay child support and attorney fees. She knows I'm a new baby attorney in town, fairly certain that I'd been licensed for less than a year. I balk, and she says she'll see us in court. I go into the hearing with a copy of his probation arrangement with his possible intent to sell and unlawful carry. He hasn't even told his attorney about this, and she is unaware. She calls him up and establishes how my client had her new boyfriend over on X, Y, and Z nights. The judge is very conservative and not pleased about this. Then the opposing counsel passes the witness. I ask him if he has a job. No. What do you do for money? Things here and there. Oh? Miss opposing counsel is awfully expensive. Do you sell crystal? What? Have you ever sold substances to make ends meet? No. Introduces a copy of his guilty plea and straight probation sentencing. The judge is now staring daggers at him. I lean over to my client sitting next to me and whisper, "If you took a substance test today, be honest, would you be completely clean?" She says yes. I ask the young man, "When was the last time you did crystal?" His attorney objects, but the judge overrules. I know this judge will do substance tests on people on the spot, as he's also the misdemeanor substance court judge. It's been years, I'm clean now. So if you were tested, you'd be clean? Yes. The opposing counsel asks the same of my client, and we agree. The judge has them both tested. The guy tests positive for crystal. My client is clean. The judge denies his motion and asks me to send in new temporary orders where the young man is required to maintain employment and start paying child support, and places the man on supervised visits. Icing on the cake, the opposing counsel actually calls me and leaves me a voicemail congratulating me on, and I quote, handing her butt to her for the first time in a very long time. That last part is nice. Your opponent didn't take it very personally and even showed respect. Nice. I've probably been very lucky in my career that very few opposing counsel, be they for the state or in minor civil matters, I try to avoid civil these days though, take things personally with me. I'm a very jovial guy and I try to get to know them over the course of cases. There is one prosecutor I currently have cases with where we may argue cases and issues, but between being before the bench, we share our respective latest cool D&D moments. We both DM games. Just recently, he and I had one of our last cases on the docket and we were discussing said sessions, and the judge had to interrupt us and say, "If I could get you nerds to stop for a second and do this motion, that'd be nice. I'd like to go to lunch." Huh, the laughs were had. Lawyers that take things personally or get personal with opposing counsel are crappy lawyers and don't belong in the profession. But that's just my opinion, man. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This was a case another prosecutor in my office had a few years back. A 30-year-old defendant was charged with the unspeakable act after he got his girlfriend's sister pregnant. She actually kept the baby, so the police just waited and got a paternity test. No surprise, defendant was the father. Defendant wanted probation. Prosecutor refused to offer it. He decided to plead guilty and have a jury trial on punishment. Here in Texas, you can choose to have the jury set the punishment. Evidence mostly proceeded as expected. The victim testified to having consensual, aside from being old enough to consent, whoopee with the defendant, getting pregnant, among other things. Paternity test was introduced. The defendant took the stand. His version of events was that he snuck into the victim's room at night, covered her mouth, and held her down while he committed the unspeakable act. It seemed like his own lawyer had no idea that that's the story he was going to go with. The jury deliberated for about 15 minutes before returning a verdict of 17 years. The maximum possible charge was 20. When interviewed by the attorneys afterwards, one of them said they decided on 17 years so the defendant would never forget the age of consent in Texas again. So a group of friends and I rented a 5-bedroom house in college. And being the group of guys we were, we partied pretty hard and were really rough on the house. We knew going in we were not getting our deposit back. Well, partway through living there, the septic started to have some problems. Whenever someone used the downstairs shower, it would drain pretty slowly, basically filling up the basin as you used it. Also, one of the room's carpets would get wet. so we emailed the property service to fix it. 2 weeks later, they sent out a plumber to snake the line and leave. Well, that didn't fix it, so we emailed again. 2 to 3 weeks, plumber, snake, leave. Still not fixed, email, and about 2 to 3 weeks and they scoop the line. Turns out roots had grown into the line, so they had to do a big old process to completely remove all the roots. Now it's fixed. Well, we all move out and go our separate ways. One of my buddies goes to Australia for 9 months. When he gets back, he comes home to a bunch of voicemails. Turns out the property company is coming after us for like $5,000 on top of the deposit. They tried to pressure him into either paying the money or he'd be taken to court. He told them he'd see them in court. For the couple of months leading up to the court date, he'd get calls telling him to pay and it would all go away. The day before the first day of court, they call him and tell him to pay $2,000 and give them info for one of the other people living on the original lease. He says to go to heck and see you in court. The first day of court is just to make sure everyone knows and to schedule the actual case. The lawyer for the property company shows up, is scrambling to figure out what's going on. He had no records beyond the original lease, which changed a couple of times as people moved in and out. My buddy helps him out by giving him copies of the multiple emails that we sent them to fix the septic and the damage it did to the house. Told my buddy he'd let us know how they wanted to proceed, and we never heard from the company again. Gotta love a justice against crappy landlords story. Keep records of your interactions with the people who own your property and photos, folks. You never know when they'll help you. Someone I knew had a pro Dio case where she had to defend a person who had been charged with a criminal offense. I don't know what, confidential, and even though the police and DA could pretty much pinpoint the crime to her client, there was no evidence to tie him to the crime, circumstantial at best. She had instructed him to shut up and let her do the talking during the trial. As from experience, the client sometimes doesn't know how to answer a question properly. She pleads and can show that the court has nothing on her client. She feels that for once, a pro Dio case is going her way. After her plea, the judge thanks her for her plea and turns to the client. He asks if the client had something to add to the plea. The client looks at her, back at the judge, tears well up in his eyes, and he blurts out, "I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again." She threw her notes and everything else she had in her hands at the client, now convict apparently. She basically got screwed by her own client who screwed himself even worse. Well, not my story, but a prior boss's story. They had a drunk driver kills a car worth of people case at the time where they were a general practitioner. My boss was representing the family that got hit, of which only the father was alive, and wanted the college guy's drunk driving skin to be mounted on a wall. This was back before Facebook was commonly used in court proceedings and before tons of people realized that crap is too great for any attorney worth their weight in salt to pass up. So, the drunk driving college kid had managed to get the judge's sympathy during the first part of the hearing by saying he was sorry, haunted, and never going to drink again. This was going to ruin his life. The judge seemed to be eating it up. Then comes my boss, who immediately burns this kid's remorse story to the ground by showing numerous Facebook statuses and photos of them binge drinking, partying, and even joking about driving drunk from the date of the accident up until a night ago. The kid looked like he was being forced to swallow hot coals, and the judge was absolutely livid. Needless to say, the kid had to do way more than just apologize and be remorseful after that. My dad was the equivalent of a public defender decades ago. There was this guy that would get caught for being drunk in public lewdness, etc. every weekend. He seemed to draw the same judges and was pretty well known to everyone in the courthouse as an absolute lost cause. One of the regular judges had him appear in his court again. The judge is ready to give him a prison sentence because he was driving a car this time. But the guy starts crying that he finally got a job out of town and was trying to turn his life around. The judge tells him that as long as he never makes a mistake in my town again, he would just drop the charges. Well, sure as heck, this guy shows up the following Monday. Same judge, driving drunk again. My dad now has his case. The judge tells him he gave him his final chance, to which the guy sobs and replies, "I was leaving town, Your Honor, but my friend decided to throw me a going-away party." The judge was not amused. My dad had to do everything he could not to laugh. In short, perpetual drunk that drove, gets a chance to leave town and not face charges, but gets drunk at a going-away party in his honor, drives and goes to jail. Faced the same judge both times. I'm currently representing a sweet old lady on a case. I'll be sparse in details in case anyone figures out who I am. Long story short, this lady's neighbor convinces her that her house is basically unsellable, that her house requires all sorts of repairs, the repairs to the house would bankrupt her, and that she should just sell the house. To him. He shows up at her house the next day with documents to sign. She has no idea what's going on and doesn't read anything. She actually has an eye condition and signs everything. When she finally sees a lawyer to close the deal, he says, "What the frick, you can't do this." You see, the price of the transaction was about 36% of what the house was actually worth, and there weren't any repairs that needed to be done that would justify the price. Not kidding, it was stuff like fixing a faucet in the bathroom. Also, she didn't understand that she would have nowhere to live afterwards. The old lady thought she could just stay in the house until she died. To make matters worse, she's living off a modest pension and the other side is suing her for the house. They're essentially trying to get her to cave because her legal fees are getting exorbitant. I hate people. To answer a few questions, 1. We do have a lot in our favor, but there are a lot of steps to get to trial. By the time we get there, she's going to have to spend a lot of money. Money she doesn't have. 2. She has an eye condition, uveitis, but it isn't bad enough to qualify as a defense, non est factum. At the time, she was driving. 3. She's a terrible witness. Her evidence is all over the place. When she was examined, deposed for you Americans, she denied being taken advantage of. That's not great for our position. 4. In Ontario, where I practice, contracts for purchase of real estate don't have to be notarized. This comes later, I just thought I'd provide a quick update. We literally just settled this afternoon, so my client can live in peace. In a little more debt than before, but nothing that will bankrupt her. As much as there are some evil lawyers in the world, I guess we do at least need a couple like this man or woman to do the good work in cases like this against evil exploitative monsters like the neighbor in this story. I was litigating a custody dispute on behalf of the mother in an incredibly conservative jurisdiction. One of the most common ways to get custody was to allege an addiction to adult content or just doing the deed, because the threshold for it was basically non-existent. For this hearing, however, we lucked out with the judge who I knew from other cases. Opposing counsel tried to gotcha me into settling before the hearing by showing me surprise messages of an adult nature between the mum and her new boyfriend. This is, of course, not law and order, and you can't introduce surprise evidence. So we go through the hearing, I object to the messages, but say I'd allow them to be read into the record in their entirety. So the uptight, very conservative local attorney gets to spend the next 25 minutes or so reading these messages in open court, occasionally asking if she could gloss over parts, but no, I didn't feel it would be appropriate to gloss over them as there's a woman's livelihood in the balance. I'll never forget hearing her struggle with certain words. They weren't even dirty. But this was like the third hearing we had to amend custody because this guy felt like his ex-wife having a boyfriend meant that she was an addict to doing the deed. They alleged the messages happened while the kid was in the mum's custody, but they based that on the timestamp of the screenshots. The timestamp on the texts was clearly at a time when the kid was not even around, and mum was safe to do the deed over the phone. The judge had heard enough of this bullcrap and awarded attorney's fees and put in the order. Consistent with the vexatious litigant statute, the dad would continue to be liable for her attorney's fees if he kept pushing this crap. It was the only joy I got from practicing family law. I sat on the jury of a man who was accused of very inappropriate behavior with children. He elected to testify in his own defenses, and his defense was, "I did it, but it was her idea." It was his third felony strike, so he'll be spending, with any luck, the rest of his life in prison. This wasn't court, but a live Portland traffic stop I was watching, and the guy told the officer, "I have caffeine pills in my back pocket," gets them out and puts them on the hood, and everyone's chill. The guy then just comes clean of its own accord and says it's Molly, and the officers look at each other and go, "Do we even have a test kit for that?" And the officer says, "No." The guy's face just shows he should have kept his mouth shut. Sitting waiting for my client, and the judge is giving a mass colloquy for an alternative program on a DUI. Basically probation. The question was, has anyone consumed alcohol or taken drugs in the last 24 hours? The obvious answer aside, one guy proudly raises his hand. "I did smack last night." He did not get probation. Police officers, have you ever had an all units call? And if so, what happened? I was doing a ride-along in college in a fairly small city in Georgia when we got an all available units call. The address came in, the lights and sirens went on, and we were hauling it at about 120 miles per hour across town. I had no idea where we were headed until we got there. The only thing the officer said to me was, "No matter what happens, stay in the frickin' car. If you see anyone with a gun, call it out on the radio like this." They showed me how. "If any of us get shot, call it in and stay in the car." Then he took a deep breath, calmly got out of the car, and took off at a sprint toward a 40-person melee in front of the only adult club in town. We were the first car there. Over the course of the next 30 seconds, officers arrived and kept coming until they outnumbered the people fighting. The officer I was riding with was completely on his own for a 10-second eternity and was able to rip about 10 people apart from fighting before backup arrived. It was the single bravest and most humbling thing I've ever seen with my own eyes. When it was all over, he got back in the car with 3 drunk and beaten up dudes in the back, turned to me and said, So, when are you going to sign up? 25 years ago, smallish rural town, my dad was a beat cop on patrol. My cat brings in a live mouse and was playing with it in the kitchen, and my mum is deathly afraid of rodents, so she calls dispatch and tells them my dad needs to come home. Dispatch gets on the line and tells my dad to switch to a secured line, there's an emergency at home. My dad's driving home to take care of the issue when all the cops on patrol in my small town, probably like 4, come with sirens and lights blazing to my house because they all heard there was an emergency at my dad's place. My mother was mortified. Years ago, a friend of mine was a dispatcher for the county. He covered sheriff, EMS, and fire communications, and also worked with communicating with other agencies as well. From the state troopers, he got some sort of text communication, not a phone text, this was before that was a thing, and it referred to an accident with injuries at the intersection of I-40 and Business 85. Something along the lines of, collision I-40 bus, 85 injuries involved. The way it was abbreviated and written made him misread it. Instead of an accident at 85 Business, he thought there was a bus collision on I-40 with 85 people injured. He dispatched every gosh darn fire truck and ambulance the county had, and they showed up, and it's a 2-car wreck with minor injuries. Former cop here. The all-units call was basically a riot at a large nightclub in a very rough area of the neighboring city. Once things were finally calmed down and a dozen or so people were taken away, my boss wanted us all back in our city. I was amazed at not only how many cops showed up, but from where. Counties and towns I'd never heard of before. I looked up a few at the end of the shift, and some came from an hour or more away. I don't know how large this large nightclub was, but evidently it was large enough to support half of the state's police personnel. How bad was the riot? Was someone there on his 5-star wanted level in GTA? More from me, the ride-along guy from the first story. This one was definitely weird for my small town. Someone called 911 and claimed that their house had been bombed. So naturally the fire department, police, and medical were all dispatched. We were among the first to arrive, and I got the same "stay in the car until I say it's okay" line before the officer left to see what was going on. Firemen were checking for fires and finding nothing, EMTs were checking for injuries and shock and finding nothing, and police were checking for mad bombers and finding nothing. From where I was sitting in the patrol car, I had a nice view of everything. The house was a nice old Mill Village-style house that sat on a corner about 10 feet off the road. Most of the house was completely untouched except for the front left of the house, which was missing a chunk out of the corner about 4.5 feet tall and about 2 to 3 feet wide, approximately 4 or 5 feet off the ground. It looked like someone threw a homemade grenade at the corner of the house, except there were no signs at all of charring from an explosion. The hole was deep enough that you could see light coming from inside the house to the outside. Now I've been sitting in the car for about 30 minutes, and the sun has set with dusk growing darker by the minute. I decide that since none of these people have blown up, it's probably safe for me to get out and take a look as well. I find my officer in the crowd and he's cool with me looking around and taking some photos, so I do. I stay out of the way for the most part and I'm looking through the grass like everyone else to find any signs of some explosive device when I almost step in a huge ant bed about 30 feet from the house in the front yard. I noticed 2 things. Someone has already disturbed the ant bed because it looks like there's a huge gash in it, and 2, there's nobody that seems teed off enough about setting in a large ant bed to have done it. Aha! A clue! I figured, find the guy with a ton of ant bites and we've got our bomber. So I start looking for footprints around the ant bed because the grass was kind of wet and maybe I watched too much NCIS. I stood in between the ant bed and the house and could make out a faint line along the grass made up of 1-foot-long dashes every 8 to 10 feet that led into the woods behind the house, across the street. I followed them to see where they went and they led to some train tracks and the trail went cold. I went back to the ant bed and used my hand to trace a line that would go roughly towards the corner of the house that was damaged. From the corner of the house, I looked across the street towards the neighbor's grass and woods and saw one long dash through the grass and a tree with a huge gash in it. I got my officer and told him I thought I had figured it out, and would he come with me to check. He grabbed a couple of other guys and we set off towards the tree with the gash, and sure enough, about 6 feet off the side of the tree was some kind of wheel or brake or something from a train that had come off at speed, rolled through the front yard, hit the ant bed and house and ricocheted off the house and across the street to hit a tree. For a while, I was known around the department and city manager's office as Detective Ride-Along. When my buddy was still a new cop, he worked in a larger city. They'd just gotten the shoulder mics, you know, the ones every cop now has mounted up by their mouth so they can call in easier. When new to them, they wore the cord in the front of their shirts, and it was always in the darn way. And great handles when people wanted to wrestle the cops. Jimmy was called in one night to a bar brawl. He strolled into the bedlam and it was almost over. He was a rookie, always getting the crap detail, so he was becoming famous among his department for ruining his uniforms. To the point he was having to come out of pocket to replace them. He walked into a vet telling him to cuff everyone still here. They'll sort them out later. Jimmy grabs the closest guy and they struggle a little bit and go down to the ground. As they do, rip, Jimmy splits his pants, clean up the backside. Knowing he's going to be the butt of the jokes anyway, he turns his head to announce to the other officers, "Well, that's another uniform down," and keys his mic. Base hears uniform down, so does everyone else in the county. The radio explodes with chatter, but the 3 cops at the bar already have their hands full, so they turn down their radios, which was screw-up number 2. Base decides to roll everything with lights to the scene. Jimmy said they were glad of the help when the first few cars rolled up, but they just kept coming. He was known as Jack the Radio Ripper until he transferred. Minor reprimand, and he still had to pay for the pants. Man, I would never be cool enough to say, "Send everything with lights." So I interned at the local police department at a time when all stations received new radio devices. The new devices looked a bit like old cell phones and had a bright orange panic button on top. It was meant for situations where a single police officer was attacked and needed help. Pushing that button resulted in all communications on the standard Channel 1 being turned one-way communication only, so all units would listen to what's going on wherever the panic button was pressed, and an automatic all free units call. All other units had to switch to the much weaker Channel 2 to communicate, but Channel 2 only allowed one device to speak. So basically either dispatch or car 1 or car 2, etc. could talk, but not multiple people at the same time like on Channel 1. To disable the panic mode, you had to push the bright orange button in a certain way, think holding it for 3 seconds followed by 4 quick pushes, and it couldn't be done remotely. This happened in rather a large city where some police stations were closed at night. Usually the ones in the suburbs where few calls came in. That night, an older police officer closed down the remotest station in the suburbs and decided to shut off the radio devices. You guessed it, he pushed the panic button on top because he thought that's where the devices were turned on and off, without realizing what he'd done. He locked the station and went home. Since it was the first day of using the new radio devices, quite a few officers were unsure of how to turn to Channel 2. Basically, all communication was blocked. Cue panic everywhere with frantic cell phones to dispatch, and dispatch trying to figure out who closed the station so that panic mode could be disabled. And remember, they only had one key to open it. So this unintentional all units call turned into an actual no units can call, though quite a few units were busy trying to resolve the situation. Well, that's a whoopsie and a half. Sorry, entire city's police force, my finger slipped. Oh, and I couldn't call in to help resolve the situation because I went home to sleep. Former Royal Canadian Mounted Police here in a small tourist town was working on a regular mid-weekday shift when we received a dispatched call for a bomb threat in the industrial commercial sector of the town. We all went there, called in the bomb squad, the dogs, got people out of the area and so on. We were doing roadside when we got another call that the local bank's silent alarm was turned on. Now, we're in Canada, in a tourist town, things are usually relatively calm. But this was absolutely chaotic. We got the all-unit call, they call our neighboring detachment to help, we all split and head to the bank. We arrived, some 20-odd patrol cars all around, to see the bank employees bound and gagged, smoke everywhere from smoke bombs. We realized very quickly that the bomb threat was the diversion. We immediately got a bolo out to get the 3 males identified by the bank staff, including a former bank employee. We get the bolo out to CPIC, got words to airports and border crossings. We managed to catch 2 out of the 3 guys. The last one flew back to his home country. He had been in Canada on a student visa. We remained on high alert for days after this looking for the 3rd guy. Canadian authorities worked with their colleagues from the guy's country to get him extradited almost a year later. In the end, as I recall, about 130 grand was missing and never recovered. For most of us, it was the first time we had a bomb threat or a robbery. First time we were guarding an area expecting to be shot from an unknown location. The robbers were reported to have AK-looking weapons. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We usually get our all units call about once a month or so. We're taught that if you need backup, if crap is hitting the fan, call it in and worry about how many people come later. A unit was on patrol 2 weeks ago and some guy just started shooting at him. All the unit got out was 34th Street, 1033, I'm taking fire. 1033 being the code for send the cavalry or officer in need of assistance. It all ended fine, we caught the guy with no injuries, but you'd better believe every officer in our area dropped what they were doing and went. Another recent one was a mini riot breaking out at a candle vigil for a murder victim. An officer stepped in alone, bad move, to stop the fight, and started getting his butt handed to him. All he said was, "Padamic 1033, but it worked. We came in, dispersed the crowd, and got out." Also, good chance to rant about a pet peeve of mine. When a 1033 goes out, there's always a few units who block the air with useless chatter. Hold me responding, what's their location? Dispatcher, I'll come back to my current assignment later. Do they need a rifle on scene? It drives me crazy. Get off the radio and leave the air clear for the unit fighting for their lives. And every unit not on something absolutely necessary is required to respond. Why would you waste time to say you're going? No crap, you're going! There was an episode of This American Life where an officer accidentally locked himself in the back of his car when he went to take a nap. He left his radio in the front, so he called dispatch and was like, "Don't make this a big thing, just send one unit to me." And then dispatch proceeds to call the code for officer down, so then he heard a bunch of cars put on their sirens and race to him. I got run over by someone fleeing the scene of an incident that they weren't involved in. He just got scared and apparently had a gun on him. I was out of my car talking to the person who called, and my partner was trying to stop the person who was really called on. So he didn't even see me get hit. No one knew I got hit or where I was because my radio went flying. Luckily, there were a lot of witnesses who called 911 and found my radio. I confused the dispatcher because I was in so much shock that I came over the radio talking like I normally do, but I was bleeding badly from my head and broke my leg. I didn't feel the pain for about 2 hours, so I had that call come out because of me. I'm pretty sure a policy got made because of me too. What's the policy say? Don't move in front of a fleeing vehicle or threaten to shoot at one unless the occupant is firing at you with a gun. Apparently me yelling, "Stop the car" with my gun out while the car was accelerating down the street, going the wrong way, is what made him turn into me and hit me when I moved out of the way. Might not have been an all-units call, but the day my daughter went unresponsive after having a febrile seizure, the 911 dispatcher sent out unresponsive 2-year-old, and we had about 30 EMT, police, firefighters at our house in minutes. We live in a rural area, short distance from fire and ambulance hall, and everyone is a member EMT. Thankfully, she was okay, but it was scary for us at the moment when her temperature wouldn't go down and then she passed out. As the story goes in Duluth, Maine, for a long time the radio signal that available officers could meet for Dunkin' Donuts was the code word "Broken Arrow." One day, a non-Duluthian was in the local newsroom when this was overheard. He got alarmed and told the rest of the newsroom that the code word likely meant that the police station was at that moment overwhelmed and outgunned, and they were calling all available units to help. Reporters rushed to the scene to find donuts. That code word is no longer used. In fairness, Broken Arrow does sound infinitely more ominous than a snack break. If I heard that code word, I would assume that stuff was going down. I mean, these kinds of call-outs happen all the time. Officers in a fight, possible subject with a firearm, major traffic accident. It's not anything like in the movies. If it's a big enough incident, all your available units are going to be going. I called 911 a couple of weeks ago because there was a couple involved in a domestic at a gas station, and I heard the phrase, "Give me the knife." Relayed all info I could to the dispatcher, and not even 5 minutes later, 2 village police units and 4 deputy sheriffs rolled up. Weapons out, yelling at the dude. I thought I was about to watch this guy get shot. This was probably around midnight. I wouldn't be surprised if those 4 deputies were all the units on duty that night. I work as a police communicator at a local university. Usually an all-units call is a fire alarm at one of the buildings. However, most of the time it's a false alarm and someone just burnt the popcorn at the lounge. One morning at work, we were evacuated from a rather large office building, 50 or more floors in New York City. Fire alarms went off on 3 floors because someone burned their popcorn in the microwave. That person will never live it down. I once got an all-unit call to my house. The backstory is that my mum was dating a crystal head and everyone knew who he was. They also knew our address. I was about 15 and one night he went off the rails and was beating the crap out of my mum. I got involved just in time to see him swing at my sister, who was 7 at the time. I ran for the phone and called it in. I got as far as the address when he grabbed me by the neck and threw me. Well, the dispatcher heard my garbled yelp and called it in as a possible homicide in progress. That, combined with his reputation, sent every single cop in the surrounding jurisdictions come flying our way. By the end of it, I think there were more than 20 police officers at our house. I ended up hitting him with my mum's cast iron skillet to keep him there, just as the first officer showed up. The officer was super cool about it and pretended he didn't see a thing. It was a terrible night and my mum was mad at me for months. But man, you don't mess with my little sister. was a military police officer on a rather large base. I was getting off shift and being transported back to my barracks by the guys coming on shift so I could check in my weapon. Suddenly, we got a call for all units to respond to a section of base housing. A military wife was having an affair with another soldier while her husband was on deployment. Supposedly, the husband was due to return soon, so she tried to break it off with the other guy. He responded by stabbing her several times. My team leader and I searched the tree line with our weapons drawn because he was armed and it was dark outside, you know? I actually passed the guy with my team leader a few yards behind me, and suddenly the suspect comes out saying, "You're looking for me." It scared the crap out of me. My team leader covered him while I went in for the handcuffing, making sure that I had my knee firmly planted in between his shoulder blades and thoroughly covering his upper torso into the muddy terrain. Not sure what happened after that. He was taken to a holding cell by another squad and I got to go home. Ended up getting transferred from that base a few months later, but I know the wife survived the wounds. Too many examples. London riots, units attacked with a machete, large group fighting with knives, building fires, so on and so forth. I was at one of the lakefront beaches in Chicago a few summers ago when, according to news reports later, a party a quarter of a mile down the trail from us started getting out of hand. Apparently, the party got way overcrowded, so a pair of cops rolled up in a squad car to get the mariachi band to quit, in hopes of folks losing interest and dispersing. This was a no-go, and the crowd responded by, among other things, breaking the squad car windows and surging in around the cops, one of whom put out an "oh crap" call. I don't know the details, but apparently Chicago cops have a code that basically means drop whatever you're doing and get the frick over here. Because within 90 seconds, Wilson Ave looked, I crap you not, like that epic car chase at the end of the Blues Brothers. If I had to guess, it must have been at least 50 cars hauling butt down onto the lakefront, one after the other. Like a high-speed parade of cop cars celebrating, "We're going to frick you up then arrest everybody" day. Which basically, it was. My father was a Port Authority Police Department officer for more than 30 years. 2 times he had all-unit calls. First was the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and the second was September 11, 2001. If he didn't pass away from an illness related to his time at the World Trade Center site in 2001, he'd be able to convey his impressions of that day better than I could. I recently found his handwritten notes from that night. They were jumbled together on his notepad and placemats from a diner in the area. The first and only cavalry charge I've seen was in Brooklyn. There was this ride on the W12 and Bowery and Coney Island in the late 80s called the Polar Express. You've all seen it. It's that ride that goes really fast around, then it goes backwards while blasting really loud music. Stupid, but whatever. This also attracted every broke bum in Brooklyn who couldn't afford to get into a club, or people who were thrown out of all of them, on weekends, and it was always a freaking nightmare. There were always fights, but you learned to let them tire themselves out a bit before you waded in because things could get ugly. I was detailed to this thing with a small army of other rookie cops on the 4th of July weekend. We were told in no uncertain terms not to go into the crowd. Ever. Nothing is happening in there that's worth your safety. So of course, a brawl breaks out and someone immediately goes running in. Now please understand, you have to go now. You can't leave the other guy alone even if he did mess up. The crowd parts for us like Moses parting the Red Sea, and then it closes on us and the airmail, rocks and bottles, come sailing. We're pretty much back to back like in the movie 300, but we're vastly outnumbered and out inebriated. We're fighting our way out and there's backup trying to fight its way in to get to us, but it's taking time, and I don't know if you've literally fought for your life, but it's freaking tiring. That adrenaline jolt only buys you so much time. Then I saw it, a flying wedge formation of mounted charging down West 12th into the crowd at full speed, with the sergeant in the middle with his nightstick held out like he was ordering a charge, and a crap-eating grin that said he'd waited his entire life to do this. I think the horse was smiling too. You'll hear the term crash a lot, and it's hyperbole. Not here. No, these guys crashed into this riot and sent bodies flying everywhere, like the bow of a great warship cutting through a stormy sea. A blue, black leather, and rowan battleship. The crowd dispersed in about 3 minutes flat, equally as stunned by what they saw as honestly the foot cops were. I know sometimes people complain about the cost of maintaining mounted police units because they're seen as unnecessary backdrop for tourist photos, and oh my god, I'm living proof that they're so much more valuable than that. Heavy sleepers. What outrageous noises and events have you slept through? I've slept through numerous fire alarms and a tree falling into our house.
What the hell kind of alarm clock do you use if you can sleep through a fire alarm?
I sleep with my phone under my pillow directly under my head on full volume and vibrations, and I use a really loud and annoying electric guitar alarm. Sometimes it is unsuccessful. Not me, but a friend. He fell and took a nap in his seat at a rock concert. He first dozed off while Hymn was playing and slept all the way through Taking Back Sunday. He was stone cold sober, just tired apparently. Visiting an aunt when I was younger. I was taking a quick nap on her couch. While I was asleep, a power line went down across her front yard. Literally 30 feet outside the window I was sleeping next to. Multiple fire trucks, firemen coming through the house to make sure everything was okay inside, sirens, alarms, fire hoses, the works. I woke up after everything was over, confused why the carpet was dirty and the yard was burnt up. My boyfriend slept through thunder so loud it set off several car alarms in the parking garage right outside the window. When I was pregnant with my third baby, I woke up at midnight to the popping sound of my water breaking. I got up and went to the bathroom and confirmed that my water had in fact broken. Got a towel and went back to bed. Woke up at 5:30 in the morning with some big contractions and figured better go to the hospital. Went to the hospital dilated to 9 and the baby was born 20 minutes later. So, labor. I slept through my labor and transition. Highly recommend. I once slept through the process of my grandmother calling 911 for my grandfather, the ambulance coming to our house with sirens blaring, the process of him getting loaded into the ambulance, and leaving. I woke up the next morning like, where did Grandpa go? I didn't even know why he had been taken to the hospital. I think it was a broken hip. A 6.8 magnitude earthquake while I was living near the Bay Area where it hit. Everyone else woke up because of the heavy rumbling, but I stayed asleep. Meanwhile, I'd wake up to someone walking in the hallway in the morning with my door shut. For the reference of those who don't have to deal with those pesky tremors in their life, 6.8 on the Richter scale is basically adjacent to the scale that can severely damage cities at a shallow enough depth. If you live in an older city or one without stringent building codes, buildings are going to come down at that magnitude. I once slept through a tornado that happened about a mile from my hotel. My girlfriend woke me up at 2 a.m. saying how scared she was of the storm and that the power went out and she was worried. I told her while half awake to leave me alone, I'll deal with it in the morning, and it's just thunder, I don't know why you're freaking out. She was fuming at me when I woke up the next morning and found out that a tornado destroyed a high school not too far away. Once a tornado formed on top of my house when I was younger. My mom screamed my name from downstairs several times, but it wasn't until my dad came up and literally grabbed me out of bed that I came down. I was so teed off at all of them for waking me up at the time. I'm quite thankful looking back on it, though. When I was about 6, I slept through our roof being torn off by a tornado. We were living in a remote area in a trailer on the construction site of our house. It peeled off and landed in a field down the road. My parents had to wake me up to go to a hotel. I wish I slept that soundly now. When I was 10, a huge thunderstorm brought the big oak in my yard crashing into the house. Luckily, my room was on the other side of the house, so it didn't get hit. I still slept. I woke up 10 minutes later because my cat jumped on the bed because the house was starting to flood. Good times. Not me, but my parents. They told me a story a while back about the time they stayed at a hotel in England for their friend's wedding in the mid-1990s. They stayed in room 1012. They went to bed as normal and sank into their usual deep sleep state. Upon entering the all-you-can-eat buffet breakfast in the hotel at 8 a.m. the next morning, they were approached by a similarly aged couple who proceeded to ask, "Oh my gosh, what do you think of last night?" My parents naively replied to the couple by saying, "Oh yes, Julie and Paul's wedding. It was amazing." The couple exchanged confused glances. "No, not the wedding reception." My parents were confused now. "All the commotion in room 1013, the room next door to you." The couple almost giggled as they expected this to prompt my parents. "What do you mean?" my dad asked as he naively continued to pile scrambled eggs onto his plate at the buffet. Turns out there was a massive substance bust in the hotel room next door to my parents. Armed police smashed in the door screaming, "Armed police, nobody move!" as like 10 police officers stormed the room. Multiple people arrested, one man tasered outside my parents' door, and a man screaming bloody murder as he was being cuffed. My parents didn't hear a thing. I once fell asleep at a Metallica concert in the middle of the show. Not a heavy sleeper, just exhausted. Now I wake up if the stars twinkle too loud. I slept so hard that my friends thought I was dead. They just kept shaking my non-responsive body. Why they did nothing about it is beyond me. God, my roommate once thought I'd legitimately died in my bed. I'd become completely nocturnal for a 3-day weekend, during which she kept going out to parties and she just let me lie there. Literally told me she was going to give me until Monday and then call campus police. Like, what if I had died and started to smell? What? I missed a whole Saturday once in high school. I just got back from a band field trip where I didn't sleep much for 4 or 5 days, and I got home from the airport at about 3 a.m. on Friday and I passed out. I woke up and saw my clock said 6, looked out the window and I thought the sun was coming up, so I went back to sleep. I woke up a few hours later at 8 and it was dark outside. I was confused because it should be bright at 8 a.m. I came out and my mum was making breakfast for dinner, which also confused me, and she asked if I was ready for school tomorrow. I was like, no, it's Sunday tomorrow. As it turns out, I slept 36 hours straight through Saturday and woke up Sunday night, thinking it was Saturday morning. It's still my record for the most hours slept. I slept for 30 hours too once. It was on a Thursday and I woke up at around 12 and was freaking out. Came into the kitchen and started packing my school bag, and my parents were just like, "What are you doing?" "Packing my school bag so I can make it to the last lessons at least." And they say, "But it's Saturday." "How?" "Well, we couldn't wake you, so we let you sleep." I slept through a fire drill at college once when I was really hungover. I wasn't hungover, I was solidly drunk, but same. I've slept through several because they'd happen all the time because of stupid people. Growing up, we had an indoor cat. Usually, we let him out in the summer, but usually not for too long. One day, we forgot him outside. Around 2 a.m., he was crying at the door to be let in. My brother and parents heard it but were mostly asleep. Soon after, another cat showed up and the two started fighting on our doorstep. If you're not aware, cat fights get very loud. My brother, who was in high school at the time, jumped out of bed shouting, "It's Kitty!" Our cat's name was Kitty. My brother ran out to help Kitty, followed by my parents. When my brother opened the door, Kitty jumped inside, but my brother didn't notice. The other cat started to run away. The other cat looked very similar to Kitty. So at 2 a.m., my brother was running down the street in his boxers, chasing the neighbor's cat while yelling, "Kitty, come back!" My parents were chasing my brother while yelling, "That's not Kitty!" And I slept through the whole thing. Someone opening my front door, walking in, taking all my crap and leaving without a hitch. It really sucked, but at least he took my school bag as well, so I had a great excuse to not have any homework done the next day. Oh mate, this sucks so bad and it happens a lot. People walk into bedrooms and grab car keys from nightstands and leave in the car parked in the drive. Very common occurrence here in Australia. I don't know why this would be more common in Australia of all places, but I too have woken up to the realization that someone has just wandered into my house in the middle of the night, and it is damn scary. I slapped my girlfriend in my sleep. She responded with a massive slap without even thinking because she doesn't take crap from anyone. I didn't wake up. She also apologized after. My brother used to kick real bad in his sleep, and when we were kids we had to share a bed for a while, being dirt poor, and just having a caravan to sleep in. Well, he kicked obviously, and we would kick him so hard back, but he wouldn't even stir, just a really heavy sleeper. I feel terrible now for how hard I kicked him, not like he knew what he was doing. I fell asleep in my dorm room while in college. I lived alone. They had a fire drill at 3 a.m. The firefighters came, opened each room and checked on us. The fire alarm didn't wake me. They tried to shake me awake, nothing. So they called in an ambulance. These guys got a stretcher, loaded me up onto it and started taking me down 3 flights of stairs. Once we were on the 4th flight of stairs, I woke up and tried to jump off the stretcher. Because, well, I thought I was being kidnapped. The ambulance guys still tried to get me to go to hospital because they thought I was on substances because I didn't wake up. The truth of the matter is, that's just the way I sleep. I have 5 different alarm clocks set to wake me up, but sometimes I still don't hear them while asleep. None of my doctors know what to do about it other than tell me to buy more alarm clocks. This affects my jobs badly. I hate it. I had to get one of those alarm clocks for deaf people. The one I bought is a sonic boom. It also plays one of those super shaking bed vibrating units that you can put under your pillow that vibrates. It also has a plug for a lamp, so when the alarm goes off, the lamp flashes on and off. It helped a lot for the first years, but now I've got used to it, so I need to change it up. I used to have an alarm app that made you do a memory matching quiz to turn it off, and every time you messed up the alarm, it got louder. Over the course of the year, I got good enough at opening my eyes, doing the memory quiz, and then going right back to sleep without remembering any of it. I fell asleep next to a speaker at a party. No alcohol involved. I've got a mate who used to take disco naps near the bass bins at raves. Absolute mad lad. Could sleep through the apocalypse. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I slept through a pretty decent-sized earthquake. Not a little rattle, big enough that everything on the walls ended up on the floor. Slept through my neighbor shooting her boyfriend. Slept through the police and ambulance sirens. Slept through the cops knocking on my door to ask if we heard anything. This was in Camara, Wyoming in the early 80s. My kid's barfing in the middle of the night, and I'm instantly up. Exactly. Actual tornado, nap time. Kids saying, "Mom, blah." I'm up. Right? Why is the sound of pre-vomit cough able to rouse you from the most dense of sleep? Or pee hitting the floor and not going in the toilet? I have 2 boys who I've both caught peeing in the hall outside the toilet. I was about 12 at the time, camping with the family, and I woke up one morning with this large, painful, swelling bump that was obviously some kind of insect bite, but very obviously not a mosquito bite. I had plenty of those already at that point in the trip. My parents checked my tent and found a tarantula with dozens of little babies on it. Oh, hell no. Where were you camping at? Some state or national park in Kentucky or southern Indiana. Someone threw a Molotov cocktail through the window of a business under my apartment. Set the building on fire, fire crew, sirens, everything right out front. Read about it in the news that afternoon after leaving out the back. I slept through the whole thing. My family owns a beach cabin on the west coast and decided to have a family vacation there for a week. We didn't realize how big the entire family was, so all the parents decided to rent the neighbor's cabin so they could sleep in one, while the cousins could all sleep in the other. Since there weren't enough beds for all the cousins, I just slept in a sleeping bag on the floor. Apparently, in the middle of the night, my younger cousin fell off her bed and landed on me, causing a very loud thud. The parents heard it from the next door, rushed into the house, and my cousins and I were still sound asleep. I didn't even know it happened until the next day. I was on a safari camping trip in Namibia with my dad and his wife. I'm not usually a heavy sleeper, but we were off at a campsite that had a bar. Hell yeah! And I'd had a bit to drink. It was a long day and I was tired and a bit drunk, so I went back to my tent early. When I woke the next morning, both my dad and our guide started asking me if I was okay and telling me how brave I was. I'm sitting there thinking, of course I'm okay. I mean, it was too hot for my liking, but it was just as hot for everyone else too, so I can't imagine how that makes me brave. They explained to me that an elephant came to our campsite during the night and began to use my tent as a scratching post. I was a wrong step or two away from being crushed to death and had absolutely no idea. They assumed I was still awake, but I slept through the entire ordeal. My dad was losing his mind trying to do something, and our guide and the person who ran the campsite spent an hour or so trying to lure this elephant away from my tent. I guess eventually it just got bored and walked away. I'd actually thought they were just pranking me or something, but we were staying there a couple of nights, and that next night an elephant, maybe the same one, I don't know, came in and was walking around the campsites again. Honestly, glad I slept through it because I would have been crapping myself. I continued sleeping after falling from my bunk bed. The lower bed is wider, queen size I think. I'm sleeping on the top bunk and I fell, but I didn't wake up. My sister from the lower bed was woken up by the crash, as were my parents in the other room. When she was in her 20s, my now wife would sometimes fall asleep when she was out partying in the club. Like in one of those unbelievably loud dance clubs that people go to all night with VIP tables and a DJ, where if you actually want to talk to someone you need to bring your mouth right up to their ear and yell while they jam their finger in the opposite ear. It would be about 3 a.m. and she'd sneak off from the group and find a banquet or lounge chair or something and just go to sleep. Makes me feel really insulted when she complains now about my snoring today. I'm like, really? My snoring is too much. But house music periodically interrupted by the DJ blasting a foghorn is okay. I hate clubs like that. Thankfully, she grew out of them. It is funny that someone can be kept awake by the basic human function of breathing, albeit with interruptions, but can apparently get some deep sleep feet away from a booming speaker. Silly humans. Not me, but my brother. Sleeps through nearly anything. The most memorable to me is him falling off the top bunk. I was on the bottom bunk and he made the loudest crash ever, followed by snoring. I'm a pretty heavy sleeper, but I haven't had anything happen to me. My mum, on the other hand, had someone bring a serenade to her place and she slept right through it. My grandmother, who is typically not a heavy sleeper, slept through Hurricane Laura and we were directly in its path 50 miles from the coast. It's been over a month and she's still upset and confused, just saying, I can't believe I slept through that storm. I slept through Hurricane Opal when I was a teenager. Several trees fell in the yard and throughout the neighborhood. Mom and brother stayed up all night freaking out while I slept like a rock. In college, a cop came into our common area because the roommates were being rowdy. He apparently knocked on my door for 10 minutes before giving up. The roommates thought I was just hiding in there acting asleep. I was legitimately passed the frick out, and the next morning I had no idea anything had happened. They all got written up though. Ha! I almost slept through the LA earthquake in 1992. I was at a friend's house for a sleepover with about 5 other kids. We were sleeping in the living room. Apparently, when the shaking started, I rolled all the way to the kitchen, was woken up by his mum freaking out and trying to get me out of the house. No one could believe that I could stay asleep during all that shaking and noise. When I worked at the coachwork part of an automobile factory, a colleague fell asleep in a bin of steel sheets and didn't even wake up when the manager pulled the emergency alarm for the entire building, thinking that he was seriously injured. And trust me, that place was loud. Slept through a dorm fire alarm and knocks and bangs on the door, countless alarm clocks, and landing while a passenger on a plane. I regularly get woken up by my partner's snoring, though. My ex kicked me off the bed. I slept through the alarm and she was trying to wake me up. Well, too bad. I didn't wake up to that and just turned on the floor to my side. I was told that I missed my bus after I woke up confused on the floor. As an extra, I slept through a party at my friend's cottage. They didn't try to be quiet and apparently I got a lap dance. A bit bummed to have missed it, but everyone refused to tell who gave it. So I'm a bit uncertain of whether I should feel relieved or bummed out. Slept through a magnitude 5 earthquake. My mum told me about it after I woke up, probably hours after it happened. I slept through a suspected crystal head trying to break into my house. I live in a fairly decent area of my city. I say fairly decent because there are mostly families and few golden-aged households, as well as some crystal heads that live on my block, where there's a huge Catholic church on the corner. My boyfriend was over the other day and he woke me up from a nap, apologizing for snapping on my neighbor because she had just tried breaking into my house. Luckily, he was awake because he ran outside after she tried to get away and yelled at her that she'll regret it if she tried that again. But she was so high he doesn't think that the message registered too well with her. I can't believe I didn't hear all the commotion, but I hope she doesn't try that again. So my stepdad was in the military before he married my mum, and while he was in the military, there was an attack on the base that he was at. I don't know the name of the base because I don't remember what he said. Sorry, Reddit. But apparently from what he said, I'd slept through the entire attack. Now I don't know if he was just pulling my leg or not, because he's a really heavy sleeper. Like for example, one time our cat Mittens had been jumping around and had pushed over a glass vase in the living room. My stepdad was sleeping in the living room at the time, and it woke up everyone in the house except for him. So I don't know if this is a real story or not, but I thought I should share this with you anyway. I grew up in quite a noisy neighborhood. I learned to sleep through everything. One day I'd gone to bed early and had fallen asleep really quickly. I woke up finally when I smelled something burning. I shot up thinking my house was on fire, something that had already happened once, and the trauma was what woke me up and what kept me up. I looked out my window to see 4 cars on fire, 2 fire trucks and about 10 police cars and the ambulance. My mum was at work, so I didn't know what happened until the next day. 2 people had died in the car crash and subsequent fire. I slept through the noise, apparently. One morning I woke up, got breakfast, and was casually informed by my roommate that our downstairs neighbor's crazy ex came by and shot at him through his door while I was asleep. So not only did I sleep through a shooting, I also slept through the sirens of the cop cars, the arrest, and my roommate giving his eyewitness account to the cops. That's the morning I learned that I will die in my sleep, just not of natural causes. My neighbor's murder on the sidewalk in front of our house. He was shot multiple times. I'd drunk NyQuil, so it knocked me out. Let's see, an earthquake, very, very small, severe thunderstorms, and one time a tree fell in my backyard and landed next to my bedroom window. Now, I did wake up, but barely. It was like half awake and I immediately went back to sleep without registering anything. Massive thunderstorm. Apparently lightning struck 200 feet from the house and sounded like a bomb going off. I woke up as if nothing had happened. My car was broken into. Our neighbor called, via the landline, this was a while back, and my roommate woke up and picked up the phone. My roommate ran outside, restrained the robber, and called the cops. The cops showed up and investigated and took statements. This was the hours between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. Then, I woke up and went downstairs to see the last cop car drive away. If I didn't see the last car, I probably wouldn't have believed him when he told me the story. A plant explosion that could be heard and felt for a 25-mile radius. It woke my boyfriend and dog up in the middle of the night, but I had no idea anything happened until I checked the news in the morning. What were the most ridiculous demands or rules from your controlling partner? I applied and got accepted into a school far away from him. Once he found out about it, he demanded I fill out his application and write his essays so he could come with me. I did not. I had a guy freak out when I got accepted to college even though it was in the same city. That's why you don't date unemployed 21-year-olds when you're 17, even if they can buy alcohol. He was expecting me to pop out babies and move into his mum's house. I was just like, ha, nope, bye. I was engaged to a man who had to approve each meal, and I wasn't allowed to eat if he wasn't present. He bought my clothes, and he always brought them 2 sizes too small, so I felt pressured to fit into them. I left him for a chef. That is crazy. Good on you for going for the chef. Crazy and controlling guys are so weird about food. One guy I dated was obsessed with me going out, as in, he thought I shouldn't eat out ever. I had a routine set up where I would head over to my friend's house after work on Friday night. We'd smoke, go eat Mexican food, and then he just showed up there randomly one Friday just as we were about to leave and tried to give me leftovers from like 4 days ago to eat instead of eating delicious Mexican food. I told him to F right off, and my friends made fun of him relentlessly. The next day, I told him we were better off as friends. He cried and tried to bargain and say that he would ease up on the eating out thing. I did not agree to that bargain. Oh, you know, just your run-of-the-mill OAG stuff. She demanded to snoop through not only my phone, but my physical items as well. When I wasn't with her, she demanded to know what I was doing and who I was with, and even went as far as to make me take pictures of what I was doing. She even made me give her my Reddit account to make sure I wasn't PMing girls on here. What truly takes the cake was when she accused me of cheating because she found a half-eaten Pop-Tart in my car. My friend borrowed my car and had forgotten it. She saw the Pop-Tart and demanded to know who it belonged to, or it was over. In short, was accused of cheating because of a rogue Pop-Tart. People like this, her, are usually cheating themselves. I dated a guy in high school who exhibited a lot of these behaviors. One time I was on the bus on the way to work and he called me freaking out because he had driven to my school to pick me up unannounced. But since I'd already left, I wasn't there. He was insisting that I was in a guy friend's car and that I'd left early deliberately to avoid him. What the frick? The same guy also offered to build me a PC. This was in the early 2000s and got upset when I refused to let him install remote access, so he could check up on my system and log into my accounts whenever he wanted. Ugh. Yuck. Good save on the remote access thing. If they made it sound innocent enough to just be checking up on updates and things, I can see some people letting them install that software and being completely at his digital mercy. If you don't have anything to hide, why don't you show me? Run away if you hear that. One time I left a class where we were assigned a group project in college. I met with my group immediately after for about half an hour. About 20 calls and 40 texts. Like she thought I was effing a stranger in the middle of the day? I'd get a call about twice a week from her freaking out because she thought someone put anthrax in her food. She broke 2 of my cell phones. The worst thing was in arguments, when she stood in front of the door and wouldn't move, stopping me from leaving. I couldn't move her because she'd say I hit her or something. That's the only woman I've ever called the C word, and I don't regret it whatsoever, because that's what she was. I was doing laundry at my mum's about 10 minutes down the road where there's no cell service. I came back to a torrent of paranoid manic texts just as she was peeling out of our apartment. Accused me of cheating on her, sleeping with a girl at work, who was a lesbian by the way, setting up fake Facebook accounts to bang my ex, you get the picture. After some weeks of this bullcrap, she introduced me to some guy she knew from high school while we were out at the bar. Mind you, I did this once, introduced her to an old friend who was dating one of my best bros. She accused me of doing the deed with her. Anyway, I came back to the apartment to find her and this guy watching a movie. She acted like it was no big deal and told me to give them space. That cued a visit to my landlady downstairs. I explained what was up. She was very kind and understanding. I always paid my half on time and helped her out around the property, so she let me forfeit my security deposit and break the lease. Since my ex was always such a cold witch to my landlady, who was a nice single mum with a nice rack, she got a whole slew of lease-breaking claims brought down on the crazy witch because my landlady had been cheated on before and felt bad for me, called collections, etc. Now the psycho is living with her mum, got knocked up by her new landscaper substance-using boyfriend, and is going for the DUI hat trick. You're not allowed to do the hard Sudokus unless you can solve the medium ones in 5 minutes. Why are you controlling my puzzle-solving habits? That guy was weird. That almost sounds like he was trying to be funny. Right after my first year of college, and she was still in high school, I joined the local volunteer fire department. She told me she didn't want me doing CPR on women because I would see their chests. Yes, everyone knows that old ladies who've fallen and can't get up have fantastic wrecks. If we weren't together physically, we had to be in constant communication. I was required to call him immediately at the end of my workday and talk to him for the duration of my 1-hour commute home. If I took too long to call, he would call me and berate me. Once I finally got home, I was allowed to take a break for dinner before chatting with him online. Absolutely exhausting. My ex told me that I wasn't allowed to look at other women. I don't mean I wasn't allowed to stare at or ogle attractive women. I mean that my field of vision wasn't allowed to contain anyone with a uterus. At work, out and about, sometimes even on the fricking TV, if she'd decided that I was looking at any woman that wasn't her at any time, I'd be in for it. I had a similar rule from a girlfriend. TV people were allowed though. That year, MTV Spring Break aired for the first time, and I wasn't allowed to watch after the first episode, because apparently those weren't real TV people, just whores who happened to be on TV. I could go on for pages about her. It ended extremely badly for me. In high school, I had a controlling ex-girlfriend who would demand I talk to her for 5 to 7 hours a day, and if I didn't, I would get texts from her trying to self-delete constantly. Yeah, that was not a fun time. 0 out of 10 would not go through again. Sometimes I'm glad cell phones weren't super popular until the end or just after my years in high school. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 18. It was easier back then to have boundaries instead of being tethered to someone 24/7. I had a boyfriend who felt I should be responsible for his emotional well-being. I believe at one point he actually said, "I'm feeling like crap and it's your fault, so you should be the one to fix it." I think that might have been after I moved out due to his behavior. Emotional IQ of a toddler, that one. My ex cut the cord of the TV and he only put it back on when he was home. I was home alone with 2 little kids all day and I was chemo sick. Also, when I made dinner, I wasn't allowed to tell him when it was ready because he said I was not going to tell him when it's time to eat. Another time, I got beat for taking off my wedding bands when I made meatloaf. The meat would get caught in my rings. Needless to say, I took my kids and walked away from him, our house, and everything I owned. F him. I dearly hope that you never saw that person again, author. Imagine forfeiting a hot, fresh dinner because it hurts your ego to be told dinner is ready. I wonder if he was the same way with waiters. He didn't want me talking to any males, even family members. Not even a simple hello with a friendly smile because this was me flirting with them. And if a guy spoke to me first, then he was flirting with me. The guy tried to make me lose my job because I'm surrounded by men all day and he didn't like that. He'd basically tell me what to do with my life, changes I needed to make, which were stupid things like me wearing makeup because I wanted to, but if I tried to tell him he needed to quit drinking, he was an alcoholic, and skipping work because of hangovers from drinking, then I was controlling and needed to stop trying to change who he is. He didn't want me wearing skirts or shirts that showed any cleave, pretty hard with my large chest by the way, because then men would stare, and by the way, they weren't staring. I couldn't wear makeup on any normal day, especially if I was going somewhere without him, because I was trying to look good for someone else? No matter how many times I explained makeup is a hobby and I do it for myself, not to look good for anyone else, not even him. Speaking of makeup, he would yell at me if I even bought a $3 lipstick because it's a waste of money, and then he'd spend a ton on beer. He'd even make me buy the beer when he didn't want to because I make more than him and he needed to save, but would spend all of his money in beer and cigarettes when he made me broke. He even made me buy multiple controllers and gaming headphones because it was my fault when he broke them when mad because of Call of Duty Online. All I'd do is say maybe he should stop playing because he was getting worked up. Probably worst of all was he didn't want me spending time and playing with my 6-year-old brother who I adore. I ignored that and even let my bro in the bedroom with me, which would make my ex extremely mad. I was a university tour guide, a position she tried and failed to get. I wasn't allowed to talk about it. However, when I had to go to a mandatory training or, give a tour, I obviously needed to tell her where I was going since she always needed a good reason for me to be anywhere but with her. So I'd have to say, I have something to do, and she'd ask what, and I'd say something vague, because, I couldn't talk about it. So she'd press more, getting very angry and upset that I was being vague. So I'd be less vague, and she'd get more upset. So I admit that it was for training for my job, and then she gets furious that I talked about it and taunted that she didn't have the job. Led to quite a lot of shouting and crying in the library. Holy crap! Talk about a catch-22. What a lunatic. It was the worst, especially with this detail. I tried out for tour guide in my freshman year and I made the first 2 cuts, but not the final one. Her and I started dating sophomore year and I went back for it and suddenly she was all interested in being a tour guide too. So this time I managed to get the job and she does like I did and made the first 2 cuts but not the final. When she found out that she didn't make it, she didn't talk to anyone for about 2 days. And from that point on, she'd always go on about how I couldn't imagine what it feels like to not make the cut. Blah, blah, blah. B-word, the same thing happened to me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I mean, there were a lot from my ex-husband. I was severely depressed and tried to self-delete a few times, and he wouldn't make money available for therapy. Even though he was unemployed, he was still in control of the finances. He just kept saying I wouldn't need therapy if I just listened to him. He also had rules that changed frequently about how many slices of cheese or meat I was allowed to put on my sandwiches. He also used to have a rule that I wasn't allowed to drink coffee because, his words, he didn't want me to be engaged in an addiction that he didn't share with me. Smoking and drinking were okay, apparently. He also used to scout friends for me and bring them home and expect me to just be friends with them? And if it didn't click for either of us, he would yell at me for screwing up. I wasn't allowed to write anything, like stories or poetry, and then refuse to let him read it. And I wasn't allowed to listen to any of my favorite music. If I put on any of my favorite music on my iPod, he would take my iPod at night and replace it with music he approved of. After we divorced, I learned he actually liked some of the same bands I did but refused to let me listen because he didn't want me to have my own thing. He felt that drove me away from him. Again, his words. I wasn't allowed to wear any clothes that made my chest look weird, which seemed to be an entirely arbitrary qualification that changed from day to day. I couldn't keep up and often had to throw out clothes that I really liked because they didn't meet his specific needs when it came to having to look at me. It's been 7 years since I left his sorry butt, and I'm still afraid of posting this and that some of you are going to tell me how justified he was. He really had me believing that he was the king of the fricking universe and he was right about everything. I still have nightmares about everyone in my life turning on me and saying he actually was right all along. Oh, and I forgot the actual best part. I wasn't allowed to sleep. He was an insomniac and would get angry and jealous when I slept 8 hours a night. I'd go to bed and he'd spend 3 or 4 hours working himself into a rage over it, then he'd pound on the bedroom door, slam it open, turn on the lights and start screaming at me. This happened at least once a week for almost 10 years. I still get nervous when I go to bed by myself at night. I had to ask permission to go to the mall by myself. I wasn't allowed to go to the gym as it meant I was making myself look better for other people. I also wasn't allowed to change my password on my laptop as it meant I had something to hide. Boy, was that a fun relationship. Oh my god, I can't even imagine sticking around after the first one of those restrictions came up. Imagine just wanting to keep your partner indoors, getting out of shape and doing nothing with their life. And why would you want to date that if you were said controlling spouse? My ex got angry if we were in the car together and I looked outside the window at scenery. Apparently, I was checking out other guys. This also applied to other cars. I wasn't allowed to look out the window and compare his car to theirs because this was seen as a betrayal. In the shopping center or mall, I could only look at the floor because then I would be accused of checking out other guys, again. There were many other things, but when I got into a new relationship, my new boyfriend was surprised when I asked, "Am I allowed to look out the window?" Looking confused, he said, "Of course, why wouldn't you?" I then realized how socially conditioned my ex made me, and I'm still trying to undo the damaging behaviors I learned. I love this because I can totally relate. My ex used to go freaking bonkers if there was a dish in the sink. It could have been a freaking spoon that he made dirty, and if I didn't clean it, he wouldn't speak to me, or he'd yell. A couple of weeks ago, I found some mold in the sink. My husband and I have a very long commute with only enough time left at the end of the day for a meal and a shower, so things don't get cleaned as often as they should, and I was afraid to tell him about the mold. I sheepishly said, I found some mold in the sink. His response? Yucky. What did I do? I squeezed him harder than I thought I could. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm only including a small portion of what I experienced, but it was a living hell for the 2 years. I wasn't allowed to talk to my best friend about anything serious. It had to be him I spoke to. I couldn't wear floral print. When I didn't lose 30 kilos, I managed 10 in a month. He said I wasn't trying hard enough. He told me he wanted a break for a year, I should move on, focus on myself and find someone else. When he found out that I'd moved on, 4 months later, he showed up at my door and asked to talk, where he ran me into the ground. I've never been more upset before. I really felt like I'd done something wrong when I'd done everything he'd asked. Poster child of narcissistic personality disorder. Wait a minute, 10 kilos in 1 month, and he wanted you to lose 30? That translates to about 20 to 60 US pounds if I'm understanding it right. The maximum healthy weight that's normal for 1 month is about 10 pounds or 5 kgs. So if I read that right and my math is right, the only way to lose 30 kilos in 1 month is to cut off your leg. I was dating this girl a while ago, I'm also a girl by the way, who would get upset when I would wear dresses and skirts because I looked more femme than her, and she didn't want people to think she was the guy in our relationship. A year and a half after our breakup, and I have more than 15 dresses in my closet that I rotate through every day, and she can go F herself. I had a good friend with a controlling boyfriend who didn't want her wearing skirts and dresses either. He compromised by letting her wear them with shorts underneath if they were appropriate enough by his standards. One day, she and I went to the mall together and she had on a cute dress. We had a nice little day together, then we went back to her place. When we walked up to the door, the first thing her now ex-boyfriend did was march over, give her a disgusted look and pull up her dress right in front of me to make sure she had shorts on underneath. It was really sad. Oh boy, my time to shine. I was required each night to inform her of the time I would be getting up the next morning. If I was not up, she would message all of my friends asking what happened to me. I would occasionally be required to make wake-up calls to her as she didn't like any of her phone alarms. She forbid me from messaging my ex, who had recently come out as lesbian. She thought I would try to get her to come back to me. I was forbidden from voicing my opinion about a coworker of hers who she had been in a relationship with previously. I had to give an explanation and an apology if I ever stopped texting her for some reason. Some examples include brushing my teeth, eating, walking the dog, picking up friends or family members if they needed a ride somewhere. She was a non-stop texter even when she was driving. I wasn't allowed to be upset by this even though I made it clear that an ex-friend killed someone texting and driving. I wasn't allowed to make plans on the fly. Everything needed to be scheduled days in advance even with other friends. When I broke up with her, she threatened to have her sister and her sister's boyfriend beat the crap out of me to get me to stay. When I refused to give in and continued to try to break up with her, she threatened to self-delete. Anytime I spoke to a female friend of mine, I was under suspicion of being a cheater, and she demanded that I let her inspect my phone. She was not happy when she learned that I watched adult content and demanded to know the genre that I watched. She said she was in love with me after a month in and was upset when I didn't reciprocate. She threatened to go back to her coworker unless I declared my love for her then and there. She prank called me to break up with me on several occasions and then got mad at me for being teed off. Doing the same thing to her was forbidden. I lasted 2 months. I was a bit whipped, honestly. There's kind of a TV sitcom trope of the hilarious whipped boyfriend, and I have just realized how objectively horrifying some of those relationships would be if focused on for any amount of time. 2 months of this sounds like hell. The most ridiculous demand? Probably that I couldn't sleep until she did because she wanted to talk to me, despite me normally going to sleep before 12 and her frequently staying up till 3 or 4 a.m. If I insisted on going to sleep, she would get mad. If I then caved and told her, okay, I'll talk to you, she would keep on hammering about the fact that I would go to sleep without talking to her. There were many, many other ridiculous demands and reasons she got angry, but that one stood out. Fortunately, she's an ex now. My first girlfriend had a huge body issue about the size of her chest. They were small and perky and I liked them, plus she had an hourglass figure and a wonderful butt. Anyway, she'd freak out if we watched a movie together and there was a busty girl on the screen. She'd often even physically cover my eyes with her hand, even in a movie theater. If we were walking on the street and a busty girl walked past, she'd be staring at me with a death glare to see if I even glanced towards her. Her little sister had a larger bust than her, so she was constantly insanely paranoid that I was secretly lusting after her 14-year-old sister. It was just a trip to the Twilight Zone. This was like 15 years ago, so I don't remember all the details anymore. I think at some point, when we were just flirting and not together yet, she asked what kind of girls I liked and I said something about curves. Perhaps that somehow triggered her insane uncertainty, but I didn't even mean bust size with it. You know, all curves. I explained that to her several times later on, but she insisted I was lying in an attempt to cover my tracks. She demanded I never tickle my pickle ever. This is despite us hardly seeing each other, so the opportunity to release was minuscule. But hey, I was under the thumb. It did give me my first and only wet dream though. Well, you're asking about ridiculous. He demanded that I should answer him anytime he calls, even if I was asleep, not call him back when I wake up. Also, I had a set of 10 rings on one finger, which he demanded to have the one I liked the most and was like, "Do you prefer material things over me?" that I not wear shorts around males even during summer when I was playing sports, because he didn't want guys looking at my butt and having thoughts about me. Meanwhile, he changed his Facebook profile picture to one of him standing in a boat, facing away from the camera, fully in the buck to show off his butt tattoo. His reason was, yeah, but I'm a guy, so it's different. I've never had such a wonderfully relieving breakup. Can you pinpoint the moment that killed your passion for your job? It was a 3-day weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and I was already scheduled to work Sunday and Monday. On Saturday, I got a call from work. They needed my telephonic help with something. That didn't require me to go in, so I handled it from home and it took me about 30 minutes. I added 30 minutes to my time card for the work on Saturday, my only day off, and on Tuesday, after his 3-day weekend, my boss tells me the Saturday overtime, 30 minutes, was disapproved because I didn't actually come in. So I just stopped answering my company-paid cell phone outside of work hours. I started working for Radio Shack as a Christmas employee in 1989. When the holiday months were over, they offered me a full-time job and I took it. For the first 4 or 5 months, it was great and I enjoyed coming to work. Then the manager got fired and a new manager took over. At first, he was okay and we got along decently, especially since they'd announced that they were going to move the store to a newly built strip mall where we should see a nice uptick in business. Great! The week of the move, I put in a lot of overtime helping to get the new store set up, putting up shelves, arranging displays, among other things. The weekend we moved, the district manager screwed us. He said he was going to rent a big U-Haul truck and get 15 to 20 people to help us. He did nothing and got nobody, so we were on our own. I worked 36 hours straight, went home for 6 hours sleep, then came back and worked another 12 getting everything moved and set up. The district manager didn't thank me for putting in all those hours and helping. He complained that it took so long to do it and said we were weak. When I went to turn in my time card, my manager didn't want to pay me for all the overtime. He and the district manager tried to convince me to volunteer those hours. When I demanded to be paid, they told me that they might have to let me go because my hours are throwing the store payroll out of whack. I told them that if they wanted to fire me for asking to be paid for the hours I worked, it was fine with me so long as they paid me. After a couple of days of arguing, they agreed to pay me. From that moment on, I didn't give a crap. I started to realize that they didn't care about me and I was just there to collect my check. My moment was when the owners and GM looked at my prostate cancer as a major inconvenience for them. They complained about me being out for surgery and I'd been out less than 2 weeks. I was back after 2 weeks wearing a fricking diaper because I was afraid of losing my job because of my illness. Then they expected me to be concerned whether they made a profit. Yeah, that's likely. My dad went through the same thing. He had prostate cancer and used his vacation time for the surgery. The surgery was in the middle of June, and since he worked in a photography lab where all the photos needed to be developed for weddings, there were a lot of them in that summer. His boss was mad that he didn't postpone the surgery until summer was over. His boss wanted him to delay surgery on a cancer that was already pretty developed so that she didn't have to work as hard. I was a little kid at the time that gave no Fs, but now it makes me mad thinking about it. I'm going to assume that these cases come from a certain United States of a major continent. Try getting away with this in the UK or Europe. My previous job. The owner of the company let go of a secretary due to hard times. It's sad but understandable. He then fired her husband who worked the night shift cleaning crew because I didn't want any retaliation. He took away both sources of income from this family at the height of the recession for no reason other than paranoia. The owner would say, "We're family here." Sure. I frickin' hate that "we're family" bullcrap. We're only family until it becomes even slightly inconvenient. Used to work at a builder's merchant, running the outdoor yard of the place entirely by myself. We should be at least 2 people, 3 people is ideal. Put up with a lot of crap, such as not one single staff bothering to help when it got busy. And it got busy a lot. And being a doormat by working 9 hours straight with no lunch breaks for weeks on end because of lack of staff. Pretty exhausting considering it's manual labor and all outdoors. The bit that got too far was when a health and safety officer showed up one day and decided to write me up for gross negligence of rules even though I was doing exactly what the company told me to do, which then led to me almost losing my job and being on final warning for 6 months. Bear in mind that I'd never had a single warning before, so this was bollocks. Crap like that makes you realize that you're nothing but a freaking number to these companies and actually going way above what you should be doing for a crap job, which is a complete waste of time. If you'd requested lunch breaks and were denied, that's when you call an attorney. You allowed that to happen. An attorney would have told you exactly what to do for a payday and start looking for a new job ASAP. When I was told to peel the remanufactured sticker off the back of the new instruments we were installing for a customer. Worked in big box retail, managed the credit and memberships being sold. Our store had not been in the green in over 7 years. Not only did I take us from the red to the green in 7 months, but had us go from number 26 in our market to number 3. I wasn't given a bonus because I'd only been in my position for 7 months, while cashiers who'd just been there 6 months or fewer did receive a share. Brought it up to the GM and she said it was just how it worked. Not only that, but she expected more out of me and number 3 should not satisfy me. I got up, walked out of the office, and right out of the front door. They called and texted me for 2 weeks straight. Even offered me a promotion to lead a higher department. I declined politely. I now manage a store and make almost double what I did there. Thanks for the motivation to move on, old job. For 7 years, I had a boss who valued the work people did and didn't care how you arrived at the end of the product. Motivated and innovative employees were recognized and generally received additional responsibility and new challenges. Then came the new boss, who was the textbook example of micromanager and ran the department like it was a 50s assembly line. Watched the amount of time people took breaks, watched the minute people arrived and the minute they left. Achievements were no longer recognized and employees were just cogs in a wheel. If there is no incentive to do anything more than the minimum amount of effort, the minimum amount of effort will be done. Was told they'd be hiring someone full-time with higher pay to do my exact same job and I would no longer be qualified. New me apparently wasn't as good as I was. The boss said she forgot how much was involved with a job. Well, yeah, that's easy to do when you give someone else all the work. My boss has told me many times that there's no set arrival or departure time from work, but the general rule is 4 10-hour shifts from Monday to Thursday. I've been getting some of the worst sleep of my life. It's getting better and I'm working on it. So I've been coming in at around 7:30 to 8 a.m., which is probably half an hour to 45 minutes after most people. I'm not missing anything because all anyone ever does for the first hour is fire off emails. If I have an early meeting, I'm never late. I have no problem staying later than anyone else to finish work. All my work gets done before the deadline every time and I never reject additional work. What does my boss do? Gripes at me for coming in when I do, tells me that that's just because the time clock says I'm clocked in doesn't mean I can bill my time if my computer is still booting up. He's the definition of being penny wise and pound foolish. I went from incredibly ambitious to bare minimum effort when I realized how little he valued me since I didn't fit his precise stereotype of what a worker should be, even though I get all of my crap done and it's quality every time. When the CEO sneered at me, "Should I call your mother and tell her you can't do your job?" No one had bothered to train me and I wasn't getting paid. So I took my things and left. Never went back. How about we call your mother, because I'm about to have a lot of free time on my hands. Yes, give that final line, sound the air horns, and walk out of the building flipping off everyone as you go. You're better off without that job. Watched as the district manager for GameStop convinced a clearly poor family that their warranty didn't cover their 3DS. I'm pretty sure it did, so I called the hero line or whatever it was to report him. I got fired 2 months later by him the day before my benefits kicked in. See you in hell, motherfricker. God, I hate reading this. I worked for EB Games in Canada for a bit over a year and the assistant manager did crap like this all the time. Not recognizing warranty by twisting words and playing technicalities out. The district manager would also come in once a week and remind us that our priority was to sell Dre Beats and only Dre Beats. Our store was located in a very poor area and no one was going to spend upwards of $600 on a pair of crap headphones. That's rent for most people. And obviously, we failed every month to sell a stupid amount of said headphones. They wanted 10 sold a month and we never sold one. We'd get scolded and put down and promptly compared to a store a few kilometers west in a very wealthy area that would double the sales target. I quit when the assistant manager tried to trick an old lady into buying an entire system when she just wanted a gift card for her grandson. Scummy company. Well, my moment came today. Recently, the company I work for took away commission and replaced it with a bonus of a free pair of jeans from the store. The item gets taxed as well, which is fine. Today we found out we get an item up to $200. The company is American and my store is in Canada. Our dollar is crap, so the prices of the clothes in my store are a lot higher now than before. In the States, that $200 gets you pretty much anything save for 2 or 3 styles of jeans and outerwear. In my store, not a single pair of jeans falls into that category. So I contact the DM and ask if we could get the American price, which would mean we essentially get our free pair of jeans. Nope, it's $200 company-wide for fairness. So I asked if I didn't take my pair of jeans if I would still get taxed. Regardless of if I take the jeans or not, I get taxed on the $200. So they took away my commission, replaced it with a bonus structure I can't use, and get taxed on it anyways. when the new guy who relies on me to do his job got promoted. You made the mistake of being indispensable. If you can't be replaced, you can't be promoted. Once I realized that no matter what I did for the company, nothing changed. When I got told that my colleague and I already got paid too much when we asked for a little extra. We're currently paid minimum wage. I had issues transferring store with an old company because they thought I was getting paid too much. Apparently $1 over minimum wage is enough to choose hiring new, untrained employees over someone who could jump in right away and work efficiently. Retail is stupid. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was the general manager of a small chain of retail stores. My boss closed all but one store and let every employee go except for me. Normally we had 4 employees, not including a manager, working at each store. They weren't doing well and we had to cut down on costs, so I understood, buckled down, and ran an entire store by myself. Not only did he never come up to the only store he owned to check on things, but I wasn't allowed to shut down and leave for lunch breaks, and was too busy to eat there. Then he and his wife started going on these 2-week vacations almost every month. She doesn't work, by the way. He came back once and told me he had to cut my pay and needed me to take over purchase orders and do inventory on the entire store every Wednesday. That was it for me. I started sending people to a similar store down the road and found a new job. There's now a for sale sign on his building. I hope he reads this. In short, my boss put more and more responsibility on my shoulders while cutting my pay and taking elaborate vacations because we were short on funds. I never understood why people think it's okay to ask people to do more for less. Yeah, I think what bothers me the most was that he was this huge Christian and would throw up Christ and church and all kinds of stuff to make himself look like a saint, when he really was probably the most dishonorable man I've ever met. When they did layoffs, during the recession, so I understand, but laid off the people who cared about their job and worked their butts off and kept the people for whom it was like pulling teeth to get them to do anything. Well, that, and also when I was interviewing for a promotion and the interview was 15 minutes of them telling me how much they loved my work and how perfect I would be for that position, and then ended with, "And we're giving it to the VP's daughter." Holy crap, that is so cartoonishly stereotypical of evil retail places that it feels like it should be on the show Superstore. Found out that the product reps were given a ton of free product to the store for the managers to distribute to the sales team. The reps would even give the managers the option of getting a few display-only models for customers to check out, or giving products directly to the sales team for them to describe to the customers. The managers would blatantly lie to the reps and would say that giving them to the sales team would help their sales the most, and then the managers would just take all of it. Then these same managers would blame the sales team 100% for poor numbers at our no-commission position. If they're only looking out for themselves, then I'm doing the exact same thing. Both of my mentors, 2 ladies who saw potential in me that I didn't, and helped me turn my life around, were fired, packaged out, within a week of each other. Fired by people who only had started a few months before and then themselves quit a few months later. The company cut out a whole department and transferred their duties to my department. Now we must do 2 people's jobs for a 52-cent per hour raise, and the strict no overtime policy remains. Fast forward 3 months and the company flies all the managers 3,000 plus from across the US to Florida for a meeting where they rent out an amusement park and have a concert by a well-known artist. Needless to say, I'm now the saltiest of salty employees. I worked sales in a radio station. We promoted the heck out of this concert coming up, and usually if the numbers reached that goal, we would get a bonus for it. Usually, a large bonus. We doubled the attendance, easily beating the goal we had, and I received a $10 gift card to Applebee's. Applebee's. Immediately after I got that gift card, I applied for a new job and ended up leaving. When they asked why I was leaving, I decided to be honest and said, when you compensate someone with a $10 gift card to Applebee's for reaching a milestone for a concert, you won't keep many people. I can't believe a $10 gift card to Applebee's is a thing. Jesus! Good on you. Getting my temp contract extended for another 6 months instead of being brought on permanent, right before they had a brand new training class of permanent direct hires. Their justification for extending? They couldn't afford it. F you, current job. The moment they hired an outside guy and paid him as much as I get to do all the social media work I'd been doing. This is right after a conversation about how great my work has been, and we had a discussion about an increase on my hourly rate due to the extra work. Needless to say, I stepped away from the social media element and they haven't figured out why it's crap now. When I asked for a big fan to be put in our work area to help circulate air, since we were working in 120-degree heat with nothing to move the air around, I was told it wasn't in the budget to purchase another fan. 2 weeks later, I found out that not only did no one check the budget or put in a request for said fan, we had two sitting in storage gathering dust. 120 degrees? Who do you work for? Mordor? One does not simply clock into Mordor. Why don't you just skip the trafficy commute by flying in on the Eagles? Have you seen the mileage an Eagle gets? This isn't a joke. I overheard one of my supervisors complaining about layoff season because she wouldn't be able to humiliate us and make us cry as often. My boss won't do anything about her. This happened a few weeks ago. My boss told me to go to one of the project leaders and tell him to stop work at a particular project. So I do that. The project leader goes, "This is ridiculous. This is a 400K job." To which I was like, "Mark told me to tell you. Don't shoot the messenger." So the project leader talks to the operation manager. The operations manager comes up to me while my boss is in the room, goes like, "John, did you tell the project leader to stop work at a particular project?" I say, "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Because Mark told me to." The operation manager turns to my boss, goes like, "Mark, did you tell John to tell the other project leader to stop work at this job site?" My boss says, "No, I did not." There were 3 other people in the room when my boss originally told me to do this, and those same 3 people were also in the room at that moment. No one spoke up. Ugh. Most spineless jellyfish bosses would normally just stammer and try to put it down to a misunderstanding, not outright deny giving the order in the first place. Nuts. When I watched every position above me in my department stay open for a year and my boss's boss wouldn't even interview one of us for any of them. Not one. All while complaining that he can't find candidates despite 3 of us applying for everything. It got to the point where one of us did get promoted. He got promoted by another supervisor that doesn't even work for our department. In fact, he filled every position himself and more or less told our boss to sign the offers. I was promoted to manager and was given no training. Oh, we had a company-wide useless leadership training, but no specific job description or anything. I asked my boss several times, but he was very flaky and vague. So I did what I thought was needed and did a ton of behind-the-scenes work to ensure that our team was running smoothly. Worked with our remote team, implemented and improved our internal processes, and dealt with any personal issues affecting team members. I gave them guidance on their careers when they asked, met with team members weekly to assess how they were doing. I met with my boss for my annual review about a year later and he said I was doing a fantastic job and to keep it up. My boss then avoided me for 4 months. Other direct reports said he was doing the same to them. At our first one-on-one after my review, 4 wordless months later, he said, "You're not really acting like a manager. I'm going to make you an individual contributor." When I pressed him for specifics, he refused to give any. He was careful not to tell me I was doing a bad job, but just kept saying I wasn't doing what he expected of me. Which, remember, he refused to tell me what he expected or me as well. This was the meeting where I said, "F this." At a grocery store. When for 2.5 years I warned that someone was going to slip and fall on the faulty loading dock for the trucks because a drip in the ceiling wasn't being fixed by the company or the landlord who owned the building, the drip was landing on the loader, which kept breaking. I griped loud enough, and the solution was to send us pretty much a portable ramp. Since unloading the trucks was a one-person job, having one person drag this ramp around was a hazard in itself. We just couldn't use it. So inevitably, someone slipped and fell on the old ramp. And only at that point, and some injury payout that was kept private, did they replace the faulty ramp that we had. Worked a 12-hour shift, then stayed on an extra hour because it was insanely busy. I received no thanks and was told by management to man up and stay on another hour. Needless to say, I didn't. Damn, sounds like you were in food service. It was a bar, close enough. Got hired as a technical writer, a job I'd been aiming to get for several years. As it happened, the team I joined was a little bit of a rogue element in the company. They had a lot of their own branding, used different chat clients, had a very different outlook on what our company could or should be doing. Most technical writers usually do online help stuff, but I and my 2 closest colleagues did tons of non-traditional tech writer stuff. Helped with advertising, user interface copy, wrote and disseminated newsletters for releases and patches. I built and maintained a very popular internal document repository and lots of other cool stuff that I loved doing. Someone I met at the company once told me that enjoying the work that others hate is the best job security, and she was right. I love figuring out how to organize documents, designing templates for Word and InDesign, making cool GIFs to show off how new product features work, and writing directly to customers. About a year and a half goes by, and the manager of the company's tech writing team pulls a bunch of strings and absorbs us into his much larger team. I'm officially cut off from my beloved smaller team, directed to never waste time on internal things like the document repository, and told that newsletters are marketing's job and that online help we'd built over the last year had to be redone in his team's methodology. He wasn't wrong, and a lot of what I did was usually what tech writers do, but gosh darn if it didn't kill the love I had for my job. He flat out told me during our first conversation that his goal was to make my job as boring as possible, and that I would always know what each week would bring. He was right about that, too. What's the worst way you've been rejected after asking someone out? Asked a girl to a dance in high school. She said, "What if I have a boyfriend by then?" I had a crush on this boy, and as a girl in middle school, you're not supposed to ask the guy out. But all of his friends said, "Do it, he'll say yes." So I went up to him in the lunchroom in front of everyone, and he stood there smiling, waiting for it. Then, when I asked, he said, "No, are you kidding me?" Laughed and walked away. It was all set up as a funny joke, and everyone was laughing. Imagine a stupid, cheap movie with those mean high school kids. That's exactly how it went down. Really embarrassing. She said, "What? I've been telling people you were my gay friend." I asked this girl out. She started to cry and told me I looked just like her brother that had died in Iraq, and then she showed me a photo of him. Did he look like you? Yeah, he looked like me. It was sort of creepy. When I was about 14, I asked a girl to go out with me. Here's what she said. "But you know you're ugly, don't you?" I mean, you don't have to say that. You can just say no. Why do you add more? That's just cruel. That crap really hurts when you're a teen. That should have been when you replied, "Yeah, that's why I'm asking you." This was back as a freshman in high school, but a popular guy kept asking me out, making a show of it before class started. Eventually, I said yes. He gave me a pitiful look and said, "You know I was just kidding, right?" If you responded seriously in any way, "Yes, no, I have a boyfriend, I don't want to date anyone, whatever," it was, "Did you think I was serious?" If you made a joke, they'd play all wounded and hurt and keep playing that they were serious and that you needed to give them a real answer. If you ignored them, it turned into a big game to make you respond. These people suck. I hated all of this BS. It carries all through high school. Near the end of my senior year, I really liked this chick who was into acting, singing, and all the theatrical stuff. Anyway, I thought she was gorgeous. I flirted, made passes, and tried to ask her out, but she would always avoid me. You can actually typecast me as a jock in high school. I played all sports, but didn't have the jock personality. I actually despised those D-bags. Well, I wrote her a note asking her to meet up and whatnot. She declined, so I stopped bugging her. I ran into her many years later in our hometown over the holidays and asked her why she rejected me. Turns out she thought it was all an elaborate prank. Damn kids. Well, the sad part is that after the story that led into this answer, this girl might have been somewhat justified. Sucks to be everyone. Oh lord, mine said, "Oh my god, you're too early. You see, I really want to go out with Paul, and I decided that if he hadn't asked me out by next Friday, then I would settle for you. So could you please ask me next Saturday? Because then I'll know if I have to or not." This was not junior high or high school. I was 32 and she was 30. Both of us were divorced with children. Just to let anyone who asks know, I didn't ask her out again the following Saturday. The other guy never asked her out either. I continued to run into her for a few years after this incident, and she became a complete train wreck. I definitely dodged a bullet, but I've always felt sorry for her kids. Oh my god, she's raising future people? In first grade, I told some girl I liked that we should go on a date. Somehow, my gosh darn first grade teacher relentlessly made fun of me for it, and the whole class did too. That really messed me up for a bit. I asked a friend to a movie or something when I was 18. She laughed, didn't reply, just laughed. Later, she asked a mutual friend to tell me there was no chance. 2 weeks later, she was at my place asking me to be a date to a party that was coming up and totally into me. I was so confused. You might have really missed out on being pranked there. Good job. You know, my wife has told me a couple of stories about a guy she has a crush on in high school, and when she said it out loud, you could clearly tell the guy was into her, felt mutual attraction, and thanks to her weird behavior, thought that she had rejected him. I think that's the female flip side to all of these. Like, they don't know how to respond to being liked sometimes, and they just insta-reject out of fear. In my wife's case, she had convinced herself that this guy, who was clearly into her, would never be interested in her. I stuttered multiple times while asking her out, and the only thing she said was, "Fail." Then she walked away. I was convinced that the girl was going to come to a movie with me, but she decided that she didn't want to go, so she sent a text saying, "I can't go tonight." Later, I checked Facebook and there were pictures of her with another guy at another movie theater. This was about 3 years ago. When I was in high school, I asked a girl out on a date. She accepted, and when the day came, she told me she couldn't go because she got grounded. I went to a movie with a friend. The girl was sitting in the row behind us, with some guy I didn't know. One time, back in the day of AOL Instant Messenger, this girl was talking to me for a few hours. We had been friends for a few years and I'd always liked her, but she didn't know that. Well, this night she was bugging me about who I liked and wanted to know so bad. Eventually, after probably an hour of deflecting the question, changing the subject, or straight up saying it's private, I said, "You." And she responds with, "Okay, well, I have to go now, bye." She ends up not talking to me for a year, and the only reason she did talk to me was because we were partnered up in a science class that next year. I also learned that around half the grade's girls were over at her house that night for a big sleepover. My school was small and my grade probably had about 30 girls in it, and they all acted noticeably different around me. They wanted to find out who it was so they could embarrass me, as I was a large dude back then and people were making fun of big people. And when they found out it was her, well, I was apparently still the butt of the joke. Middle school was a lot of fun. Mine said, while laughing loudly, "Are you serious? Are you asking for someone else or… oh?" And now, a year later, I'm used as a joke. Mine said, "Do I know you?" In the second grade, I built up the courage to tell this girl Casey that I liked her. I only told my friend Daniel how I felt. I got off on her bus stop 3 blocks from mine and I started walking towards her and said, "Hi Casey, And she interrupted me and yelled, "Why did you get off the bus? I don't like you and I don't want you to ever talk to me. Daniel told me everything. Just leave me alone forever." I was pretty broken up about it. I marched right to my friend's Daniel's house to kick his butt, but his aunt told me he moved that day. Daniel, if you're out there, F you. High school, my awkward phase. My mother tells me I'm pretty and I finally get up the courage to ask out the cutest guy in my year to the movies. He says, "I'll have to think about it," and takes my cell phone number, which I thought was a good sign. We texted a few times, arranged a meet-up at the movies. Get to the day and I'm ready to go. I make myself look all pretty and do my hair nice. I get to the movies and he's there, but so are all his friends. All of them, including the guy I liked, are laughing at the absurdity that he could ever want to go out with me. Laughing at the fact that I got dressed up. It was all a big prank. I've never been so humiliated. This is the worst thing on here. That's just awful. What a bunch of absolute eggplants. Well, I got over it. It made me a nicer person as well, I think. I tend to look past people's appearances and look on who they are on the inside. I think it was beneficial in the long run. Asked a guy I was crushing on to prom. He said, "Sure." 2 weeks before prom, I heard that he had asked another girl. Well, I never said yes. Wow, D-bag alert. And weirdly, not the only person in these stories seemingly keeping someone on the back burner as a safety option. At least that's what I assume he was doing. I swear that this wasn't me. A guy I know works at a boutique clothing store and got a crush on this girl that also works in said store. He asked her out and her response was, "I don't appreciate you talking to me." My response? God damn! This thread is not boosting my self-confidence. In 10th grade for prom, I did a big romantic ask involving our school's marquee, the big signs with interchangeable letters outside some schools, and she said yes. However, the night came, I picked her up, she refused to take pictures with me, barely ate her dinner, and turns out when we got to prom that she had used me to get a ride. We lived on the outskirts of Houston, about an hour away. All because she didn't have a car and her actual date lived out where the prom was and didn't want to drive into town to pick her up. So we got to prom. Literally, the second we walk inside, she runs away and jumps into the other guy's arms. I felt real bad, man. Listen, I don't want to sound like an eggplant or anything, but maybe she only said yes because you made such a big spectacle of asking her out and she felt obligated to say yes. Like maybe she felt bad rejecting you in front of the entire school. Then afterwards, she couldn't work up the courage to tell you the truth. Then refused to take pictures or eat because she felt guilty? Or maybe she was just a manipulative B-word. I don't know. Honestly, it's not a great thing to make a grand public romantic gesture as a way of starting a relationship. You should only do something like that when you have reason to believe it's going to go smoothly. Otherwise, it's pretty messed up for all parties involved. I'd find it humiliating to face the choice between turning someone down publicly or saying yes publicly and then turning them down afterwards. Mine told me she would rather eat her own tampon. Many tears were shed that night. Met a girl on OkCupid, we did some chatting and some texting. We decided it's time to meet. I go to the spot and I see her. It's obviously her. She makes eye contact with me from about 20-ish feet away and just keeps on walking. I leave, delete her from my phone, and never heard from her again. I didn't have an OkCupid account for much longer either. What the heck? You planned to meet up, you knew what each other looked like, and she showed up and then walked by? That's cold. At least meet up, hang out, and then politely excuse yourself a bit after you've decided that you're completely uninterested. But walking by? What on earth? I know, right? What really got me is that I was actually thinner than my pics on the site. My logic was that if she had agreed to meet a 15-pound heavier me, she'd be impressed by the new me. I was pretty floored by it. At least have the common decency to let me down like an adult. I don't know if she was nervous or scared, but if she didn't want to eat dinner with me, I honestly didn't care to find out. I'm not going to play any games. This isn't high school. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friend made this girl a card with a poem in it for Valentine's Day, and he asked her out. She said no and laughed at him. It doesn't help that he misspelled beautiful and the poem went like, "Roses are red, violets are blue, you are beautiful." We refer to that day as the Valentine's Day Massacre. I ended up having a huge crush on this girl that started hanging out with my circle of friends via a friend of a friend kind of thing. She'd just hang out with us, play video games, and talk crap with us, and just generally be a cool girl to be around. We were friends for several months before I started having some stronger feelings for her. I finally got the courage to ask her out. She turned me down in what I hope was an attempt to be nice by saying, "I don't think I could look at your face and be happy if I ever slept with you." Was that her way of saying, our friendship is too important for me to complicate it with feelings and intimacy? Although I appreciate your courage in asking me out, I think, for now, a friendship is what I need from you. I convinced myself that that was indeed the case. I ran into her years later and she told me not going out with me was one of her biggest regrets. We ended up going out, drinking too much, and found our way back to my apartment, where we had a great night of crazy one-night fun. I woke up the next morning and she was gone. I never heard from her or saw her again. I guess she really couldn't stand seeing my face after we slept together. Back in high school, I had a girl say something to the effect of, "Oh God, not another one," after she found out I liked her. I'm sorry about that, and I know it must have been hard, but you have to understand that sometimes this is also really hard for the girl. I don't know her and you didn't specify her tone, but not knowing which of your friends really like you and which ones only want to hook up because you're hot is depressing and annoying after the initial ego boost. My friend had that, not me. I wish. I was the awkward one. 12th grade prom, I finally got up the nerve to ask the girl I was dreaming about for like the last 4 years. She said yes to my astonishment, but says sadly she or her family didn't have the money for a dress. I promptly offered to buy a dress for her and she appeared very happy. After some time, she said, "Let's rent a hotel room. We can go early and get it, then go home and change." She went with me to go get the room first thing in the morning. She grabbed the key when the clerk gave it to us and said, "Okay, see you tonight." We'd already planned the limo and paid for it. I found it weird that she wanted it to pick up her first. She said she wanted to meet my parents. Well, I go home and get ready and waiting and waiting. The limo never comes and she doesn't answer the phone. I get a hold of my buddy at the prom and he tells me that she's there with some other guy from another school wearing the dress that I brought her, riding in the limo I paid for, and I'm sure going to the prom I paid for. Needless to say, I have trust issues to this day. A friend of mine asked a girl to dance one night at the club. Her response was, "No thanks, I've only had one drink." All my friends said you're too ugly for me to date. I think the worst part of this is that the lady or gentleman in question is either hiding behind their friends to avoid doing the hard work, or it's genuine and they haven't formed their own opinions. Ugh. Let me preface this by saying that I'm a guy. It was middle school and the last few days of 8th grade. After that, I would have gone off to high school. I wasn't really sure on whether or not I was gay or bi or whatever. All I know is that I had a really big crush on someone I've known since 5th grade. After a tormenting few days, I finally got the courage to write the most intricate, most delicate love letter that I'll probably ever write in my life. I don't think it was creepy. It was along the lines of, "I really like you. I know it's weird for a boy to say that to another boy, but it's the end of the year and I figured I'd throw caution to the wind. At the very least, I'd know that I tried instead of wondering what if." And I asked him out. I gave him this letter. I told him it was extremely personal. Instead of reading it right there, he took it home instead. Tomorrow was the last day. I couldn't have possibly been more stressed. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. My heart was racing the entire night. Finally, the last day of school comes, and I'm sitting on the stairs reading Ender's Game, waiting for the day to start where he comes up to me. Now, since this is the lobby, pretty much the entire student body is crowded in here, waiting for the bell to ring so we can scatter to our homerooms. Right there, loudly, in front of everyone, he took something personal and made it into a public spectacle. I was shut down in front of the entire middle school, and at the same time, outed. I was shocked, mortified, and he didn't even do it nicely or privately. Until right then, he was the nicest guy I've ever known. I didn't cry. I don't think I could have with everyone so silent, watching me like they were. The bell finally broke the silence and everyone else shuffled off. Next year in high school, his friend was in my English class. I don't know how we started the arguing, but he started reciting something that sounded familiar. It was excerpts from the love letter. The guy I had a crush on worked up the courage of 1,000 suns to ask out. He had showed all of his friends. Wow, that was incredibly courageous of you. I rejected someone the worst possible way almost 20 years ago, and it still haunts me. Maybe he feels the same way now, if he was a nice guy before, and like me, he was the biggest little coward back then. The first time I ever had a crush on a boy, I invited him to dinner. I cooked it all on my own and everything. I waited 45 minutes before I finally just went to my room and cried. I was 13. Just remember, guys, it is so much better to ask and hear a no than it is to keep pondering over if you should have made a move. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky. I mean, that's also a quote from John Wilkes Booth. I'll be leaving now. I had a crush on a girl for all of middle school and 2 years of high school. After my friend set me up to ask her out, she said yes and we spent a great day together. After I got home, she called me and tells me she's changed her mind. She goes back to her ex and then dumps him a week later. Another mutual friend then invites her over for our 4th of July celebration. I made a custom firework, which you should never ever do by the way, and set it off. The problem was, I dropped a spark into the main chamber as opposed to the fuse. What was essentially 3 flares blew up into my face. I wasn't injured at all, but when I regained composure, all I heard was the girl yelling out to my friend to see if he was okay. In short, blinded by the light, wrapped up like a dink, another runner in the night. She told everyone in my small liberal arts college how awful I was. To this day, I don't understand why. I was completely nice and, if anything, too shy. I always feared a girl doing this to me, which is why I was so shy in the first place. She just destroyed my self-confidence for years and years afterwards. I think ignoring me. That's got to be the worst because it makes you think about trying again. Maybe they didn't hear me. All sorts of possibilities fly through your head. I just want something concrete like, sorry, you're not attractive. Laughter. The laughing is definitely the worst. People really undermine the whole process by saying the worst thing that could happen is she says no. A girl and I were friends in high school and hung out a lot. I liked her but was too shy to ask her out. I was popular and a jock, but overweight and had serious self-esteem issues. Yes, even jocks are human. We flirted and I thought she was giving me the right signs. My crush was the worst kept secret. Everyone knew, even her, but we all just ignored the elephant in the room and continued to be friends until I could work up the courage. On Valentine's Day, I laid a large bouquet of roses and a love letter expressing my feelings and asking her out on her front porch. All I got in return was a thanks. No discussion or anything remotely related to the content of the letter. I was too embarrassed to pursue the issue and pretended it never happened. I then found out through the grapevine that she didn't like me in that way. She was actually waiting and hoping someone else was going to ask her out. I played that off, but I was terribly hurt. Ironically, because we were such good friends, everyone expected me to ask her to prom, including her. It was clear she would have said yes, but we'd have gone as friends. One night I was hanging out with one of my best girl mates, and I impulsively asked her to the prom. She was so excited and said yes, even though we'd be going as friends. When word got out that I'd asked someone else to prom, it was a scandal. The other girl never got asked to prom, and I had a fantastic night with my group of friends. She said yes, but the next day I saw her with another man on the playground. Oh, the woes in the life of a first grader. Just for the guys out there, I want you to know that throughout my life, plenty of guys have asked me out for which there was definitely nothing wrong with them. In fact, I was attached to them and would definitely have said yes had I not had a boyfriend already. Sometimes no just means poor timing. Keep that in mind. I got her number when I asked her initially, bragged about it to my friends, and then when I called later, she responded along the lines of, "Ew, wish you'd just said no from the start so I wouldn't have bragged." I'm into taller guys. That crap affects my confidence on a daily basis. I really do hate being a short guy. After a few weeks of hanging out, I finally asked. He said, "Sure, we can go out sometime, but you know I'm gay, right?" I was so shocked all I could do was say, "No, I did not know that." In elementary school, all of the girls in my class had a crush on the same boy. A bunch of us got together and wrote all of our names on a paper which read, "Circle the girl you liked most." He replied with, "I hate all of you." Theme park employees, please share your juiciest horror stories. I worked on a major roller coaster many years ago. Two preteen boys rode in the front seat and were screaming down the first hill. The ride takes a sharp turn there, and one of the kids managed to have his teeth hit the other kid's forehead. They rode for the next 2.5 minutes, screaming and bleeding as only a head injury can. Came back into the station looking like everyone in the first section had been in a war. A ride they will always remember. That must have made for an amazing souvenir photo. One time, a bird dive-bombed into the funnel cake frying oil and exploded. We had to fish it out. I used to work at a sky coaster ride at a theme park, which is a ride you have to pay extra for that's essentially a giant swing that you have to wear a special harness for. Up to 3 riders can go at once. Several guests commented that it was the most terrifying ride in the park. Once there was a boy, about 13, who was begging his mum to ride with him. She refused but said she'd pay for his ticket to go alone. So he did. Long story shorter, he threw up mid-ride and showered chunks of Skyline chili all over the ride area, including people in line, the guy who records the rides on video, and myself. When we finally got him down, we discovered that he'd also peed himself. So I got to wash the suit before going home. I didn't work there very long. I worked in a water park in a dual-park, single-entrance location of a very common chain of theme parks for about a decade during high school and college. The frequency of adults crapping themselves or pooping in the pool was revolting. 2 stories of note. I was working for a party for the employees and their guests after normal park hours one night, when a fellow supervisor and I noticed some poopy prints meandering down the sidewalk. One employee followed the trail toward the bathrooms, hoping to find a child running frantically to make it. I followed the trail in the other direction, away from the bathroom, praying that I didn't find anything but the end of the trail. I make it about 15 drips down the path heading away from the bathroom towards the lazy river and look up only to see a gigantic woman built like a house wearing a floral one-piece. She has a giant brown stain on her butt and just streams of liquid chocolate running down both legs. She was just strolling along, not a care in the world. I had to spend hours scrubbing the poopy off a textured concrete surface because some huge lady must have gambled on a toot and couldn't care less that she had buckets of brown stuff piling up in her bathing suit. Another time, a kid was floating around the river and just dropped trow and let her rip. It was one massive, and I mean gigantic, poopy. We had to chase it around the current and scoop it out. It was larger than any baked potato I've ever seen and was girthier than my clenched fist, and weighed about as much as a Chipotle burrito. Long story short, never swim in a water park. If a public pool is roped off for maintenance, in my experience it's 80-20 because someone crapped in it and the pool techs needed to shock the pool with chlorine because of cryptosporidium concerns. God, the amount of times the local pool I swam in as a kid got temporarily shut down because of a poopy, and the amount of times that I just jumped back in 10 minutes later after the all clear is making me feel gross. Still, every natural body of water is filled with number 1 and 2, so I guess you just can't win. Employee comes to work one morning after partying all night. Nobody noticed that she wasn't 100%. Security guys later said she seemed fine. She gets to her station on an elevated platform, doesn't follow procedures and falls about 3 stories and dies right before gates were supposed to open. What procedures should she have followed that would have prevented this? While the ride was being test run, she left her post for some reason and went out on a restricted catwalk. She was well aware that this was an off-limits area. Nobody knows why she decided to do that. Witnesses said she was bending over like she was trying to pick up something when she lost her balance and fell. She was probably trying to throw up. Ended up throwing herself up all over the pavement. I used to work at Knott's Berry Farm in Southern California. A little kid went to ride the roller coaster Silver Bullet, a somewhat fast coaster with lots of twists and a couple of loops. I was one of the guys who checked the lap belt and whatnot before the ride took off. The kid looked scared but seemed like he was with his older brother and his friends. All of the kids seemed to be a few years older, and he probably didn't want to look like a chicken. The kid straight up pooped himself. It made the seat extremely moist and definitely smelled of number 2. As you got off the ride, you could see liquid dripping down his leg as he rushed off. People in the back of the line didn't really know what was going on, but the front of the line, as well as this kid's brother and friends who just got off too, definitely knew. Poor guy. We had to shut down the ride for about 2 hours to sanitize it, but played it off as technical difficulties. Former Disney World cast member here. Here are some stories. While working at Club Cool, some father dropped his daughter's pants and let her squat on the floor. I had a standoff with a guest for 3 hours in the Mission Space gift shop because he was trying to steal Vinylmations. Got told a couple of times that I ruined someone's vacation, and I met Warwick Davis. I worked on the cleaning crew at Soak City, Knott's Water Park. Once I was mopping the bathroom and a dad and his kid were using the same stall to pee in, and the kid says, "Daddy, why is your pee-pee so big?" And the dad just laughed and told him his would be that big someday. You could tell he was proud of his junk at that moment. Also, a little-known fact is that the women's bathrooms are 10 times nastier than the men's. People usually consider men slobs, but girls absolutely trash the bathroom, peeing all over the place, leaving sanitary napkins all over it, and other stuff. Also, I wouldn't recommend going into the wave pool or community pool. We frequently found number 2s, sanitary napkins, and other stuff floating in there all the time. Volunteered at a fair one summer in my old town. Some mentally deficient guy got caught tickling his pickle in the haunted house while one of the carts going through the ride rounded the corner and saw him in all his glory. "I get away with this all the time. I just tell the policeman that I was pretending to be part of the ride, because seeing me spanking the mule is horrifying." When I was little, I went to Legoland. I was so excited that I ran up and tried to hug a statue made of Legos, and I cut my eye. And on that day, everything was not awesome. I worked at a crappy theme park for 3 months in my teens. One morning, I got to my ride and there was blood everywhere. Feathers too. So I did my walk around and there's half a goose. It took 3 maintenance guys 2.5 hours to find the other half. Well, now I know where the company Christmas dinner came from that year. I'm kidding. Owners of these places don't even do things that nice for their employees. I'm not an employee, but as a kid, I went to a local amusement park that also had a water park inside it. I was running around a circle that was basically a huge circle of water cannons. Now, most of them had a foam tip at the end, but I happened to run past the only one where it had worn off while some 14-year-old idiot flung it up as hard as he could. It smacked me square in the mouth and knocked me out cold. Since these were in a circle, they just put a drain on in the center so they could run them constantly. My lifeless 8-year-old body got ragdolled into the center and the water diluted the blood so it looked basically like I'd died and bled out. They shut the park down and had to life flight me out of there. Apparently it looked bad enough that the local news was even reporting that I'd died at first, but in the end I just had to get 8 stitches above my upper lip, and now I have a scar and can't grow facial hair in that spot. I operated rides for 2 years. 2 moments stand out. The scariest moment I had was when lightning struck a utility pole below me. My position on the ride was about 50 feet up. It knocked out power to my ride and forced me and my supervisors to unload the ride in the middle of a lightning storm. The second was a guy who was very upset that I wouldn't let his kid, who was a foot under the height requirement, ride. I told him no early in the day, but one of my co-workers let the kid ride while I was on break. The family comes up later and the father, who was noticeably intoxicated, jumped 2 gates and over the tracks to threaten me with a knife. I called security and he ran. Kings Island ride operator here. A kid fricking jumped in the water at one of my rides, Congo Falls, going after a basketball after I denied him permission. I saw him go in and I pounded the E-stop and called it in. Police showed up, security, all of my supervisors, and the fricking kid got away before they got there. So the little jerk caused a bunch of people to get stuck in the ride while we explained the rule about the water. Over at Extreme Skylifters, it's like a ripcord type ride where you swing back and forth on a long cable. Somebody got sick. Literally hurled about 5 gallons of their stomach contents back and forth over a 150-foot flight lane. There was so much fricking spew. We had to call park services to get enough Voban, the absorber, and you could smell it throughout the whole area. While working at Six Flags, maintenance was working on our larger SLC boomerang. The guy was guiding the car back into the station, but didn't look to make sure the floor was back in position. He stepped back where the floor wasn't and fell a solid 15 feet back to the ground. The best part of the story was him looking around, realizing he was in a restricted zone and putting on his neon vest before getting up off the ground. Worked for Disney World's 2005 college program. The full costumed characters aren't allowed to talk, ever. Nearing the final days of the internship, several of the characters would whisper into children's ears variants of, "Only you can hear me. Help me. Goofy will hurt you," etc. Other than that, there was a crap ton of self-deletion happening at the happiest place on earth. If you're a guest, are hungry, and don't wish to pay Disney's exorbitant prices for food, just lie to a cashier and say you dropped your food or something. Company policy is the guest is always right. Employees are never allowed to argue with a guest. They'll know you're full of it. Oh, and if a cast member ever says to you, "Have a Disney day," this is the secret way of saying F you. The older hotels are riddled with asbestos, though this has likely been changed by now. And with few exceptions, every face character is a major jerk. Oh, here's something I witnessed. At a local park, there's a slide called the Triple Dip. The slide lives up to the name and dips 3 times. A really small kid rode down it once and just started rolling and doing backflips because he was too small. At the end of the ride, he basically just got up and walked away, acting like nothing had happened. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work in the games department at a major amusement park. I'm in upper management, so I've been around a while. A horror story: I was walking around the park, we call it taking a lap, and checking on all the different area supervisors to make sure they're all set. I get into the children's area and see a game that has about 10 guests waiting to play, but no associate working, so I hop in and start helping guests. After about 10 minutes, they all leave. So I'm teed off because there should be someone working the game, but there isn't. I call the supervisor and prepare to chew them out. He tells me that there should be 2 associates working there at the moment. So I start looking around, knowing that they're in trouble now. Eventually, I climb the ladder to the attic where we keep the stock for the game. I found the 2 associates. The guy was mid-thrust when I blurted out, "What the actual frick?" The 2 were doing the deed in the attic of a game in the children's area. I immediately called security and fired them both. Then I had the supervisor spend the rest of his shift working that game. I worked at an aquarium once. One day this man came in with his infant son and started holding him over the shark tank and pretending to throw him in like an idiot. Surprise, surprise, he then drops the kid in the fricking tank. The kid smacks his head on a rock and starts bleeding in this huge tank filled with sharks. A few people quickly jumped in and saved the kid from being eaten. Goes to show that some people should have just been a stain on the sheets. I worked a roller coaster park, and whenever people would complain that they were lost or had to go to the bathroom, I'd get them on the path to the really expensive bathrooms. I miss playing Roller Coaster Tycoon. Free soda, $10 bathrooms. You monster. My brother and dad were always pulling that crap, charging out the wazoo for bathrooms and maps, drowning unhappy guests, removing footpaths to trap and confuse, making coasters fly off the tracks. I love that game. The narrator is just glad that some people are as evil as he was when he played that game as a kid. But I will say that I wasn't even doing it to win. It just made me feel powerful and brought me joy. Back when I worked at a relatively large East Coast theme park, we had what many called the craziest shutdown anyone had ever seen or heard about. The ride I was working was a dark ride, a motion simulator that followed a track and had 3D projection seats. I was closing in the control room that night where we would dispatch ride vehicles, RVs, and monitor ride cameras and ride control screens. Over the headset, I heard that an intoxicated male couple was coming up to ride. Okay, fair enough. As they were getting on, they were acting slightly belligerent, so I was informed to watch them through the ride by the loader. In Scene 1, the ride has 11 scenes, they began to make out. Fair enough, it happens all the time. I was narrating it over the headset since it was a slow night and we were all shooting the crap. In Scene 3, I saw their hand moving due south, and the next thing I know is that they're standing up in the RV. At this point, I depress the emergency stop and all the ride lights come up with the RVs stopping in place. I then call the ride down, explaining the e-stop is due to a drunk couple standing up. Here's where it gets interesting. They decided to slip their way out of the lap bars and begin climbing out of the RV. I get on the mic telling them to please return to your sleigh. They're also called sleighs. Little did I know I selected all call on the touchscreen for the ride mic, and people down at the ride entrance and passers-by were randomly hearing me yelling, "Please return to your sleigh." I scan the monitor attempting to find them in the ride area and cannot for the life of me find them. At this point, the entrance host calls control to ask what the heck is going on. I explain and he busts out laughing. I hear my supervisor's keys jingling as she runs up to the exit platform, as she's laughing from the call over the radio about a drunk male couple standing up and climbing out. Once she arrives, we do a ride evac so we can reset from the e-stop and walk to the track to find the culprits. After about 30 minutes, we can't find them and give up, and start cycling the ride again before going back up. We checked the control screen to see if there'd been any ride doors opened recently, and none had since that morning when maintenance was clearing the ride for operation. At close, we all had to fill out witness statements for security, and we all had a good laugh. The next morning, maintenance tells us they found 2 protection wrappers in Scene 3, the scene that they escaped in. To this day, we have no idea where the heck they ended up. So in short, a drunk male couple escaped the ride, did the deed, and were never seen again. I worked at a water park. It was towards the end of the day and I was pushing the tubes down at the top of the slide. People started looking at me funny and looking around strangely. I started hearing people talking about number 2, but I dismissed it as nothing. Then someone came up to me and told me to look at the platform below us. I looked down and what do I find but a big pile of brown neatly placed on the middle of the stairs. I worked at a low-grade park mainly known for their go-karts for 2 years. The horrors were in the many. We constantly had kids purposely trying to hit you with carts. I witnessed one kid hit my coworker at full speed. My coworker tried jumping over the cart at the last minute, but that was the worst possible action. His knee ended up hitting the kid in the head and knocked him out going full speed into the wall. My coworker then flipped a few times, finally landing on his face. When all was said and done, 2 people were hauled off in an ambulance, one with a concussion and the other with a broken nose and cheekbone, topped off with some busted teeth. My favorite was when a group of rich guys came through and started making bets on who would win each race on the go-karts. The same guy won twice and was quickly up about $1,000. So one of his friends pulled me off to the side and asked if there was a way to make him lose. What people generally don't know is that there's a control panel which controls the speed of the car remotely. This gets used if someone is getting too rowdy or breaking the rules or something of that nature. So I told him about the control panel and he offered me $100 to make sure that the guy who was winning took last place. I agree, and he goes off to entice this guy into another bet. This time, he bets him $1,000 that he'll take dead last. The guy was bold. He wasn't just going for his money back, he was going for everyone's money. The ensuing 12 laps were the best of my career at that park. Every time this guy got alongside someone, I brought him down a bit. Every straightaway, I would drop his speed by about 5 miles per hour. By the end, this guy was furious. He paid up and stormed out of the park. Just because you're the best, it doesn't mean you'll win. The smartest will usually find a way to win. I worked at a certain park for 2 summers. The stuff I saw made me never want to come back as an employee or a guest. I'm going to keep this vague for multiple reasons, but you'll probably guess where I worked. The biggest horror story came from the fact that I spent 2 of those years in fear of losing my job every single day. Food employees were required to sell a certain product to every person who approached the counter. It didn't matter if they just wanted a cup of free water or already had 10 out of each item. We had to try to sell the product to them. The problem came in that there were secret shoppers checking in on this. If they caught an employee not asking customers about the product, the employee could be terminated on the spot. I watched multiple friends get fired because of this. My second year, I had a management position. I thought this would fix the fear. I was wrong. If I or an employee under me didn't sell this product, I would be demoted and transferred to another area. Now I had to make sure that my co-workers were upselling also. My advice from working here: avoid holidays, go early in the week, and learn which rides are the most popular because they will have the longest lines. When the ride operators tell you to empty your pockets, fricking do it. I'm not kidding. I can't tell you how many iPhones, watches, earrings and stuff I've seen fall while the ride was going. Even a wad of hundreds. And it's a really long procedure to retrieve the items. We actually have to shut the entire ride down because you didn't listen, and everyone in line gets super teed off for having to wait more than they already do. Okay, but you pretended that you didn't find the wad of hundreds, right? I'm just saying, you keep that stuff and punish the presumably rich D-bag for his non-compliance, and get that same rush of power the narrator felt whilst drowning his roller coaster tycoon guests. I was a scare actor, a walk-around, at Six Flags theme night for Fright Fest a couple of years ago. I was in costume and heavy makeup. The guests seemed to forget that the actors were actual people and not statues that they can do whatever the frick they want to with. My hair was pulled and I was often touched inappropriately. Also, people seem to think it's funny to show up to a theme park completely wasted, so I was thrown up on a couple of times. But by far the worst experience in my short time of employment there was when I scared this jerk's girlfriend to the point of tears and peeing herself, and then he punched me in the gut. Not sure if this matters, but I'm a female and my costume made no point to hide that fact. I could have retaliated physically, but I would have likely been fired, so all I could say was, "Thanks, kind stranger," and alert park security. He was thrown out of the park along with his wimp of a girlfriend. I'm sorry, but don't come to a fricking fright fest if you don't want to be fricking frightened. Last year, I was at the Pleasure Pier in Galveston. They have a log flume ride relatively close to the entrance, and I was there to witness the most disastrous throw-up broadside I'd ever seen. As the log was coming close to the drop into the water pool at the bottom, there was a kid in front who was obviously not doing so great. As the log tilted forward and rushed down, this poor kid blew chunks in the front seat. But that wasn't the end of it. Apparently the wind, coupled with the moving ride, blew stomach chunks into the faces of seats 2, 3, and 4. It was terrible, but absolutely amazing. I worked for a major theme park in Orlando while in high school hosting a children's show and managing the nearby kiddie coaster. At the children's show, we were never allowed to break character. One day after a show, the father of a 5-year-old boy told me to explain to his child that everything here is fake. I didn't break character. The father kicked a trash can, screamed, and said he would sue me and threatened to beat me up. He was ejected and banned for life. One of my employees, a high school girl, came into work wearing an eye patch. In front of guests, she told another employee that she had to wear the eye patch because after going down on her boyfriend, she didn't wash her face and woke up the next morning unable to open her eyelid. She had to go to the ER and they had to cut her eyelid open. She was suspended when guests complained about her telling the story in front of their children. I also had to fire a middle-aged woman for eating gummy bears that were soaked in vodka while she was operating the kiddie coaster. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.